Right now, you're watching this video on a screen, and that screen is innocent, or it can be a doorway to something darker. One wrong click, one stray curiosity, and you could find yourself trapped in a corner of the internet that's so twisted, so grotesque, and so horrifying, it changes you forever. Cult leaders who live stream their own delusions, rescue videos that are anything but rescues, and blogs written by monsters who believe the world owed them forgiveness. Today, we're opening doors most people scroll past and leaving no rock unturned and finding the worst corners of the World Wide Web. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into some horrifying internet rabbit holes. The fifth nail. According to one myth, the gypsies crafted 5 nails for Christ's execution, not 4. The 5th nail was made to pierce his heart, but the gypsies kept it hidden. In some stories, the women are punished, and in others, they are rewarded. This 5th nail is said to have once been an existing religious artifact with special healing powers. Its existence today is somewhat questionable, unless of course you consider the philosophical symbolism. The quote I just read, though it seems harmless, is anything but. It's an excerpt from one of the most disturbing pieces of online literature I have ever read. A collection of blog posts by a sick, demented criminal. And although normally the blog is very difficult to find, I scoured the internet and finally got my hands on it. A harrowing view into the mind of Joseph Edward Duncan III, American serial killer, on his infamous Fifth Nail blog. Joseph Edward Duncan III was born in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, on February 25th, 1963. His father was a military man on active duty, so the family moved every year or two, all across the United States. He had many siblings and, for the most part, had a good early childhood. Although he claims it was awful, his siblings insist it was a good home. In 1979, his parents decided to separate. His older sisters moved out on their own. His younger brother went to live with his father, and Joseph, alone, lived with his mother. Now, very little is known about his childhood from that time forward, but we do know about his actions, because Duncan, when living in Tacoma at the age of 15, held a 9-year-old boy hostage at gunpoint and did unspeakable things to him. That was his first criminal offense that we know of. The following year, he stole a car and was sent to an all-boys group home for juvenile offenders called the Jesse Dyslin Boys Ranch, which, by the way, this boys ranch could be a whole video by itself. Very problematic institution, but that's not the topic we're covering today. While he was there, he admitted to a therapist that, before the age of 16, he had brutalized an estimated 13 younger boys by various different means, including binding their hands and feet before carrying out his sadistic, perverted acts on them. I'd like to reiterate that I said estimated, as in he wasn't sure of an exact number. Estimated. He was released from the boys' home in 1980, and in that same year, he broke into a neighbor's house, stole their guns, kidnapped another preteen, and did the same shit he did to the other estimated 13 boys. So yeah, this guy was a monster. And from what I know of him, he was always a monster. After this final attack at 17 years old, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He served 14 of those and was let out on parole in 1994. Duncan settled in Seattle, where he tried to keep his head down. He spent 2 years as a free man doing unspeakable things we'll discuss later. Then, 2 years later, in 1996, he was caught violating his parole by smoking weed and was again in jail. After several weeks, he was released again under new probationary conditions. After his release, unbelievably, he violated parole again and was rearrested again and was finally released in 2000 at the turn of the century. This time, he wanted a whole new start, so he moved to Fargo, North Dakota to be closer to his mother and adult siblings. But Duncan had some resentments. After all that, all of his sick crimes, leaving behind 14 victims in the wake of his sadism before the age of 16, he felt he was treated wrongly. Duncan believed that he shouldn't be judged for his crimes. And without a platform to speak his mind, in 2004, he started making blog posts. He called it Fifth Nail. Here is an excerpt from his first ever post, edited for decency, which I'm gonna say was incredibly difficult. January 4th, 2004. Just found out that a 5-year-old girl went missing from Chisholm, Minnesota on June 14th, 2003, this year. I did not even know until today that this happened, so I tried to figure out what I was doing that day, since I'm always afraid of getting accused when something like this happens. You might say that finding out about the girl missing is the most proverbial last straw because of all the other recent incidences in the news lately, especially regarding missing people and the resulting intensification of the persecution of perverse criminal offenders. I've decided to start this blog as a sort of check and balance of where I am. This is for my own safety. I figure it is just a matter of time before I am falsely accused of some crime or another. I already had the police at my door telling me some women downtown were waving my picture around that they printed from the internet, accusing me of harassing them for a date. The visits was very intimidating and not friendly. I was warned that I was being watched as a known perpetrator of perverse crimes. The visit made me consult an attorney for advice. He told me there was nothing I could do unless charges were filed. I feel like a southern black man, just wondering when the lynch mob is going to show up at my door. His paranoia, it turns out, was correct. Remember that 2-year period where Duncan was free before, being arrested 2 more times? Well, turns out the police suspected he wasn't keeping his head down in that time frame. They believed his crimes had only gotten worse. And while Duncan was blogging about his woeful existence as one of the most disgusting human beings I've ever had the misfortune of learning the name of, the police were piecing together his latest sadistic crime. Now, before I get into that, I'm going to read one more excerpt from his blog. There's about 2 years of regular entries, and most of them are absolutely vile. And frankly, I don't want to read any more than I have to. So just to get a clear picture of this man, here's another entry for you from his infamous online diary. And viewer discretion, because this is one of the more insane ones I've found. February 2nd, 2005. I committed a perverse crime when I was very young. I was sentenced to a perverse crimes program for adults where half the men in my treatment group sat and fantasized about me. After 2 years, I was a senior member, When the state therapist paid a surprise visit to my mother's house and propositioned her, saying it would help your son in the program if you cooperate with me. When she told me about it, I quit the program and was sent to prison, where, accordingly to at least one official report that was written before I was sentenced, because of his appearance and age, he would likely be mistreated by other inmates if sent to prison. True story. I thought I would only do a few years and get out, not having to be around such evil people who represent the system. But because of hysteria, I ended up spending over 12 more years in prison before finally being awarded parole. All my psych reports say I am a low risk. I was just a kid acting out of confusion over my own experiences, and studies show conclusively that my type of offense is rarely repeated. And yet almost 30 years later, while I have no parole, nor have I ever committed a new crime, the police insist on knocking on my door several times a year, and sometimes in the wee hours. Check that I still live here. I have no privacy at all. Anyone in the state, country, even world can find out where I live, what I look like, and what I did when I was a kid just by typing my name on any web browser. This does not only hurt me. If that was all, I could accept it because what I did was bad, but it hurts my mother, my family, my friends, and even my neighbors who thought I was a great guy until they find out. Then they are afraid of me. It hurts society because it scares people into thinking every strange person is a suspect, and at the same time it deceives them into thinking the government can make them safe by telling them about the bad ones. Even the Fargo police website admits few convicted, perverse criminals ever reoffend, so some of the more ignorant people in the world will read this and think they deserve it. I call these people ignorant because they don't see the hurt they are causing. More children, more victims, just because they are afraid to admit their own secret desires. I cannot express to you all how much I absolutely, to my core, fucking despise this man. The fact that I just had to speak those words out loud disgusts me. But it's important for you to know who this man was. Irredeemable scum. One of the worst people I've ever written about, bar none. And the self-proclaimed innocent Duncan was about to go on a killing spree. May 16th, 2005, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. The grown family are spending the night together. They were a tight-knit household, a loving family. The mother of the household, Brenda, then 38, was asleep in bed with her boyfriend, Mark McKenzie. In the adjacent room slept her kids, 13-year-old Slade, 9-year-old Dylan, and 8-year-old Shasta. It had been a peaceful, uneventful day. And tonight, they were all resting easy. But not for long. At approximately 11 p.m., Joseph Edward Duncan broke into the home. Brenda woke up and rushed into Dylan and Shasta's bedroom. Someone's in the house. She gathered the kids with her boyfriend, and they ran into the living room, trying to escape. When they encountered Duncan, dressed in all black, carrying a gun, Duncan tied up the family. At some point, he pulled Dylan and Shasta outside, leaving them alone on the lawn. Though immobile, inside, the sound of sickening thuds could be heard as Duncan bludgeoned the boyfriend, mother, and eldest son to death. The two surviving children, Dylan and Shasta, were kidnapped. For 6 weeks, Duncan took them to campsites and did unspeakable things to them. After 5 weeks, he accidentally killed Dylan when a shotgun misfired. After the death of her brother, Shasta was nearly killed also, but she convinced him not to by using his family nickname, Jet. Eventually, the two were found at a Denny's in Shasta's hometown of Coeur d'Alene. Shasta is the only surviving member of the grown family. Joseph Edward Duncan III was arrested and convicted of murder for the nighttime massacre of the grown family. But that's not all. Remember that 2-year parole period? Turns out he spent that time on another, earlier killing spree. He was found responsible for the deaths of Samiaho White, 11 years old, her half-sister, Carmen Cubayas, 9 years old, and Anthony Martinez, 10 years old. The jurors who sentenced Joseph Duncan to the death penalty had to be offered counseling for the horrific evidence shown on trial, including a 33-minute video of him physically attacking one of his victims. He died at the age of 58 from brain cancer. The Fifth Nail blog is an X-ray into the mind of a horrific, disgusting vermin known as Joseph Edward Duncan III. Like I said, there are 2 years of blog posts, but honestly, you might want to skip this rabbit hole. There's a ton of information, a ton of description and detail on his Fifth Nail blog, but at the end of the day, the only thing that matters in this story are the victims. All of them. Young and gone way too soon. I hope they can rest easy knowing this man can't hurt anyone else ever again. Animal exploitation. 5 years ago, a video was posted to YouTube titled "Rescue the Pitiful Little Dog Falling Down the Drain, Screaming for Help, Nobody Cares." In the video, a man is walking down an old, craggy sidewalk on his way to work when he hears a strange noise. He stops by an open crack in the ground to listen, and what he hears is a puppy in distress. Somehow, it got stuck in an abandoned storm drain. Thankfully, there's no grate, and the man is able to rescue the little dog. He crawls through the weeds, deep under the sidewalk, and pulls out a dirty little pup, crying and looking confused. The video has tens of thousands of views, and the channel behind it produced dozens of similar rescue videos, puppies in distress, dirty, mangled, broken, and of course a heroic figure swooping in to save them. Across all their content, the channel has amassed millions of views and hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I watched the video in absolute horror, not because the puppy was in danger, but because something about it didn't feel right. These types of videos are unfortunately very common on all of the popular video streaming platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. At first, it seems perfectly innocent. A group of kittens drowning in a river, a puppy with a broken leg, and an unwitting hero swooping in to save the poor, desperate creature. These videos garner incredible attention, get shared by every grandma with a smartphone. But the terrifying reality is, a lot of these videos are staged. When we watch Rescue the Pitiful Little Dog, there are clear signs that this video isn't genuine. Firstly, the man is already recording. He walks down the street on his way to work without a care in the world, when he just happens to stumble upon a puppy whining in a crack in the ground. In fact, he doesn't even stop to find where the whining is coming from. The camera just glides down perfectly to a single half-an-inch wide crack in the sidewalk, almost like he knew exactly where to look. And then all of a sudden, there's a second camera. Someone else is recording him rescuing the puppy. Not only do we never see this person behind the camera, I thought our hero was on his way to work. Who is this person? Is it a coworker? Well, in a way, it is. You see, oftentimes these videos are coming from economically poor countries. And with the surging popularity of animal videos in the early 2000s, people wanted a way to make some money. And nothing gets as many shares, likes, and comments as animal rescues. Unless you're a robot, watching an animal being saved is going to make you feel something. And that's for the vast majority of people. And you might just want to share that feeling with others. Because of this, animal rescue videos aren't just popular, they're lucrative. Millions of views can equal hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars on certain video sharing platforms. But how often does one find an animal in distress? Well, unless you're working for animal control, not often. I'll ask you this. How many times have you encountered anything like this in your own life? An animal in distress, tucked away under a sidewalk or lost in a storm drain? I bet most people could count on one hand the number of times, and truthfully, it might be zero. So if you're living in a poor nation, and if you want to start a business farming animal rescue videos, how do you do it? Do you wait around hoping to find an animal in distress? No, these people don't wait for danger. They are the danger. They purposefully endanger animals behind the scenes, and once the cameras are rolling, they can swoop in and save them. Here are some other video titles I encountered across many of the still active animal rescue accounts. Rescue the dog tied on the motorcycle. Rescuing a paralyzed abandoned puppy. Rescue 3 poor puppies in a plastic bag. These are not accidental discoveries. They're not spontaneous rescues. They're by design, each of them planned, staged, and recorded to pull at your heartstrings, garner your sympathy, and make a whole lot of money. But it's not just puppies. There are whole hosts of other species being tormented online. Puppies, monkeys, chickens, anything with 4 legs and a heartbeat is being exploited online right now. The most common format is animal abandoned by its owner, which accounts for about 30% of all fake rescue videos. But there are many more that are popular. Formats like an animal is almost attacked by a predator, where a baby animal will be put next to a snake and saved at the last second. Or animal saved from beneath rubble, where the people making the videos literally bury these poor creatures alive, and this sick trend isn't going away anytime soon. I found a Reddit post from 5 years ago listing 44 accounts that were most definitely allegedly producing fake content. Many of them have since been shut down or have rebranded amidst backlash, but some are still alive and kicking, despite the dangerous, disgusting, inhumane content. And there are so many other channels. Once you start looking for similar content, similar rescue videos, it just goes on and on. Anytime one gets shut down, 2 more seemingly take its place. And the horrible part about it is you can never be sure what's real and what isn't. I just recently saw a video of a monkey drowning in a river, getting rescued by a guy on a boat. And I have no idea if it was staged or not. And that's a disturbing thought. That really, there's no verifiable way to sift between the good and the bad. Everything is suspect once you kind of learn this. The type of animal exploitation, fake rescue videos are a rampant issue on all social media platforms. But what if people don't want to see an animal saved? What if they hate that animal so much they'd like to see it hurt? injured, maimed, even killed. Well, that's when we get into another type of animal endangerment, in a group so disgustingly evil it boggles my mind: the monkey haters. In 2024, a documentary titled Free Minnie was broadcasted on the BBC. It tells the real-life story of Minnie, a female long-tailed macaque, and how she was saved from her years of brutal captivity. In 2022, a woman named Kapetinich had just finished a long day of work, was browsing through recommended videos on social media when she discovered a cute monkey video. She watched it, liked it, and went to bed. The next day, more monkey videos, this time in funny costumes, doing unnatural tasks, playing, dancing, juggling, what have you. Before long, her feed was nothing but monkeys, and the content slowly became more and more disturbed. Monkeys getting slapped, sprayed with water, and one monkey being physically brutalized. That monkey was Minnie. The lady ended up in contact with another man, Dave Guptar, who had also taken note of the monkey haters in their horrible, inhumane videos. They shared their knowledge and became something of a team. They tried to find similarities between videos, but the more they watched, the further they dug, the more despicable it became. Monkeys weren't just being injured, not anymore. Some were being killed. And the people watching, the sick audience of thousands, were loving it. But one monkey appeared in more content than all of the others. Her name was Minnie. She was just a baby, and she was seen in countless videos being hurt ruthlessly. Seeing this poor, innocent baby being hurt and exploited for entertainment was too much to bear. They had to do something. Together, the duo approached animal activist Nina Jackal. She knew about Minnie, but she didn't know the full extent of what was happening. When she saw the content being produced on social media, she was both horrified and enraged. Nina began her own investigation. She discovered that every once in a while, in the comments, people were offering to pay the man who was hurting Minnie, and the response was always the same: add me on Telegram. Now, for those of you who don't know, Telegram is like the Tor browser, but for private messaging. It's meant to be completely private and keep your messages hidden, even from service providers. She followed the breadcrumbs and discovered that there were entire dark web forums dedicated to buying and selling content on Telegram, much worse than anything available on social media, drownings, or flat out murder. And this wasn't one man creating these videos. There were multiple across nations who made a living torturing innocent animals. I mean, how messed up is this? One of the largest brokers of these horrible videos, the self-proclaimed king of brutality, was a man from the United States called Mike McCartney, a 48-year-old former motorcycle gang member of the Aryan Brotherhood, and card-carrying Confederate sympathizer. He had taken a liking to the monkey videos, especially Minnie. He spent his days selling videos, disturbing videos among customers, and he made a good amount of money doing it. But even he wasn't at the top of the food chain when it came to monkey haters. Mike McCartney operated on a Telegram channel called Ape's Cage, ran by the mysterious Mr. Ape. Mr. Ape ran the communications between buyers and vendors and created some videos himself. He would ask for ideas from the community, what tools to use. But his most popular video involved a blender. Absolutely horrible, disgusting, morally reprehensible, human beings. But while most monkeys died, many survived. Minnie lived to see her first birthday, and for that, she was a celebrity amongst monkey haters. She was the sadistic trophy of their community, said Mike McCartney. The Babe Ruth, the Marilyn Monroe, the Elvis. In this demented little circle of ours, that was Minnie. Eventually, by looking for commonalities in the videos, they were able to identify some of the perpetrators. Police agencies in multiple countries were contacted to track down and arrest these individuals. And one by one, they were all taken offline. By tracking the flow of money after each arrest, they eventually found Mr. Ape. And although we don't know his name, we know he was a Florida man in his mid-20s. And he had been running his sick telegram since the time he was in college. And Minnie's owner was finally arrested. For Minnie the monkey, we don't know exactly what happened to her over those years in captivity. At least I'm not looking for those videos because I don't want to know personally. But we do know her injuries at the time of her owner's arrest: broken jawbone, missing teeth, bruises, scars, and intense psychological trauma. Today we know that Ape's cage has been disbanded. The broker, Mike McCartney, is facing heavy prison time, as well as other distributors. And many of the monkey hater content creators have been arrested and charged. But just like the fake rescue videos, this all boils down to one major point. This content isn't dead. At the end of the day, these two stories are just the tip of the iceberg. While social media platforms attempt to regulate this type of content, sometimes it slips through the cracks. And as criminals get smarter, it gets harder and harder to stop people like this. For both of these stories, the rabbit hole goes much deeper than just this information. It's basically endless. You could spend days going deeper and deeper into the sadistic, secretive networks of animal exploitation rings online, but at least for me, I won't be going any deeper anytime soon. Love has won. Amy Carlson was born on November 30th, 1975 in McPherson, Kansas. She was a child of divorce, splitting her time between Kansas and Oklahoma City. Amy was described as smart from an early age. She did well in school, always had good grades, sang for the school choir. While her academics were thriving, behind the scenes, her home life was falling apart. After years living with her father, an abusive stepmother, the pain became too great. And so Amy moved in with her mother, eventually relocating to Texas. Here she wanted to begin her new life, but above all, she wanted love, affection, the all-American nuclear family. But Amy had trouble keeping relationships. She'd meet a man, they'd have a child, and then they'd break up. By the time Amy was 30 years old, she had been married 3 times and had 3 beautiful children. She supported them by working as a manager for McDonald's, but she wasn't happy. She neglected her children, and after her 3rd child was born, she began to distance herself from the family unit she fought so hard to create. Why? Well, around this time, she started getting involved in New Age religion, which I'd categorize here as a more radical form of spirituality. Think holistic medicine, crystals, and tarot, but for Amy, she took it to another level. She believed in multiple dimensions of spirituality, like metaphysical dimensions, soul reincarnation, the healing power of loving energy, which, to be fair, some of this isn't very strange. Many Eastern religions are built on these same beliefs, but her beliefs were evolving. Online, she met a male called Amaranth White Eagle. See what I'm saying? And he convinced her that she was divine. Amy wasn't some mortal working at McDonald's. No, she was Mother God, a being that had been alive for as long as time. Someone that had reincarnated into many bodies. The Hawaiian god Pele, Cleopatra, Jesus, Harriet Tubman. She claimed that in a past reincarnation, Donald Trump was her father, and before that, Elvis Presley was her son. Eventually, in 2007, she had become so convinced of her otherworldly spiritual powers, she abandoned her life, went no contact with her 3 children and her family, and disappeared to Colorado to be with her muse. Together, Amy and White Eagle would form a new religious group. And when I say group, I mean cult, called the Galactic Federation of Light. Now, before I continue, I want to make this abundantly clear. We're going to hear a lot about Amy throughout this story, and she does some weird things, some irresponsible things, and some downright dangerous things. But I want us to remember, this is a sick woman. She was influenced by White Eagle, who I'm sure was influenced by someone else, and all of them were influenced by a whole lot of drugs. So I'm not discounting the gravity of her actions. I'm just saying she was just as much a victim as she was a perpetrator. Even her daughter, when later interviewed, wants us to remember Amy as a human being who is sick, not just a crackpot cult leader. And I think it's important to make that clear. Moving on, she moves to Colorado, and together with White Eagle, they create a website. Weekly, they post about their doctrines, taking the moniker Mother and Father God, while their partnership in the Galactic Federation was purely managerial. Behind the scenes, they were heavily romantic, and in 2009, they posted their first YouTube video. Truth is a brilliant symphony. The message is very difficult to follow. Amy Carlson's Mother God, hosting convoluted talks about truth, God, angels, the universe, energy, and atoms. Now, over the course of many more videos, we begin to understand her evolving beliefs in better detail. Amy Carlson was 19 billion years old, a deity called Mother God, and had birthed all of creation. Father God was her second-hand man, and sometimes her lover. She accessed the 5th dimension via contact with the Galactics, a communication of dead celebrities like Robin Williams and Whitney Houston, who served as dimensional spirit guides. She had been reincarnated 534 times, and the job of her current incarnation was to lead exactly 144,000 people to salvation in her mysterious 5th dimensional heaven. And soon enough, the group had its first passenger, Miguel Lamboy. Miguel was the first person to support the Galactic Federation, and he took a special interest in Amy and the inner workings of her spiritual vessel. He would become the group's logistics director, managing the finances. The minutes of her first follower began a long cycle for the Galactic Federation under Amy's control. She would frequently eject people who didn't fit her doctrine or those who didn't agree with her, and this complete control became very toxic and dangerous very fast. When the group joined TinyChat, a website where you can create custom chat rooms accessed by random people, the Galactic Federation of Light began to develop a larger following. And this pattern of Amy's controlling, dictatorial nature began to rear its ugly head. Here's an excerpt from a Redditor who had a first-hand account with the group early on, and the post reads as follows. I first met Amy back in 2013 through the Galactic Free Press and Tiny Chat platform. Back then, LHW did not exist yet, but the cult-like recruiting tactics were being developed. Miguel Lamboy, who went by Michael Silver, had an administrative presence along with Amy and a few others. Many of us would join online together nightly to share spiritual videos, music, meditations, etc. Honestly, we weren't there because of Amy. We just enjoyed the interactive platform. It was a fun hangout with like-minded people from around the world. We initially tolerated Amy and the first Father God's controlling mechanisms. They would temporarily block you or kick you out of the chat room if you said anything that was contrary to their thinking. But the most interesting and engaging conversations and interactions almost always took place once Amy had left the chat for the night. I had a few one-on-one Skype encounters with Amy. Sadly, I saw right through the con that was developing. Amy even invited me to join her in Dunsmuir, California, which I declined. In late 2013, as the Galactic Federation scene started to devolve into a more cultish setting, I went out and started my own spiritual tiny chat. About 20 or so people followed me over there from GFP. Amy and her followers would daily try to get us to rejoin her. As per this user's story, Amy began to develop a new personality. Gone were the days of innocent spirituality and happy-go-lucky values. No, her rule was becoming stern and absolute. If someone didn't align with her beliefs, she expelled them or blocked them, ostracized them from the community. But that was just online. Around this time, she gained a second follower, Andrew Profasi, who wanted desperately to worship Amy. The two began a romantic relationship, and before long, Amy expelled Amarith White Eagle, the first Father God, and replaced him with Andrew. Just like that, the man who started it all, the one who had filled Amy's mind with delusions of grandeur and elevated purpose, was abandoned by Her Majesty, his Mother God, and the delusion he created developed a life of its own. With the help of Miguel Lamboy and her new, more obedient Father God, the group began to expand. People from across the country made the migration to join the goddess reincarnate. People we'd later see on live streams and in community videos: Hope, Aurora, Faith. Together, they traveled from Colorado to Oregon to California, spreading their ridiculous gospel to anyone that would listen: the desperate, the defunct, the lame, and the lonely. A small convent of lost, gullible souls to poison with her doctrine. But she couldn't do it with the same old ideas she developed with White Eagle. No, she wanted a fresh start. Though the same spiritual hierarchy remained, with Amy at the top of the pyramid, the optics had changed, and the Galactic Federation of Light became the now infamous, fully formed Love Has Won cult. Amy implemented new rules for the group: no drinking, no smoking, a strict dietary plan, and an even stricter sleep schedule. Members of Love Has Won were only allowed to sleep for 4 to 5 hours a day. In many videos, followers can be seen falling asleep as other members attempt to shake them awake, but they scarcely do. The group called this spiritual discipline, but from the outside, it began to look more like torture. These types of strict rules are common among cults, frequently cited as brainwashing tactics. Followers are more likely to be obedient if their freedoms are revoked, and their reliance becomes upon the group itself. If you wanted to join Love Has Won, you had to leave your family completely. These tactics amassed them a group of approximately 15 to 20 who lived with Amy, and whatever Father God was present at the time, moving from state to state. And because of their recent expansion, they needed more money, and they made it selling holistic medicine online, including colloidal silver. Now, colloidal silver is typically sold for its healing properties. At least, that's what it would be sold for, if it had any healing properties. In fact, colloidal silver has no bodily purpose, no recognized function, isn't an essential mineral, and when consumed, it does nothing but wreak havoc inside and out. Consistent consumption is considered dangerous, and although it's technically legal, the CDC does not condone its consumption. That being said, people continue to sell it for its mystical, spiritual, non-existent healing properties. The group also made many claims to improve people's health without the use of meditation. Love Has Won promoted their ability to pray away cancer, chronic illness, depression. Of course, selling false remedies and prayer cures will ultimately garner the attention of the public. And before long, Amy and her followers were facing heavy backlash. But not just for their snake oil sales, they also publicly held beliefs in many conspiracy theories, ones that, frankly, tend to piss people off, believing that most American tragedies were hoaxes staged by the government's lesser energy minions. Needless to say, people have never and will never resonate with these extreme claims. And for those cities and towns hosting Love Has Won, they didn't enjoy having a cult in their community to brainwash young, feeble minds into joining their ranks. In 2020, Amy and the Love Has Won group briefly moved to Kauai in Hawaii, where she publicly claimed to be Pele, the Polynesian goddess of volcanoes, fire, and creation. Shortly after their arrival, locals began to protest. It was a hostile, angry environment. This random white woman came onto their property and proclaimed herself as one of the most revered deities in their culture, and the native Hawaiians were not having it. They feared, like so many others, the cult would attempt to indoctrinate their friends and family too, which of course they did attempt to do. Protesters began lighting driftwoods on fire and chanting prayers around the rental property the group was staying in. As the days continued, the protesters grew less patient and more violent. They began throwing rocks and eggs at the windows of the property. Group member Lauren Soares, who I referred to earlier by her chosen name Aurora, captured video footage of the attack and the resulting broken window. It got so bad, the mayor of Kauai had to come and broker a negotiation between the two groups, eventually leading to the departure of Love Has Won from the island. And just like that, the group had returned to Colorado. In the year that followed, Amy's presence online became less and less frequent. Witnesses noticed her health was declining. She was getting thinner, smaller, quieter. Something was clearly wrong. But Amy sought no solutions to her obvious medical issue. As the weeks turned to months living with this illness, she became paralyzed from the waist down, and her skin became blue. As her health declined that December, on New Year's Eve, Amy had a conversation with her sister over Skype, who noted that Amy looked awful. Amy, in response, told her sister that she had cancer. It was the first time the pair had spoken in many years, and little did her family know, it was the last time they would hear from Amy ever again. In early April of 2021, the group relocated to an RV camp in Mount Shasta, Northern California, attempting to find new footing in a different area. but were asked to leave due to overcrowding. After this, they made their final migration back to the Love Has Won mission house near Crestone, Colorado. On the journey, the group made a chilling Facebook post stating, "She has ascended," and the Love Has Won website was taken offline. In late April of 2021, Miguel Lamboy, head of finance at Love Has Won, contacted the police, saying that something awful had happened to Amy. When police arrived at the mission house, they discovered the unthinkable. Amy wasn't just dead. She had been mummified. Judging by the state of decay, she had died sometime during the trip back to Colorado several weeks earlier. The group had wrapped her in a sleeping bag, tied it with Christmas lights, and covered her face in glitter, a final makeshift shrine to the empty vessel of their mother god. When asked what it was like transporting the corpse from California to Colorado without any way of stopping the decomposition, the group responded, "You could smell God everywhere." But how did she die? Well, the corpse was blue-gray in color, and a photo taken just a little before death showed her emaciated blue-gray body, just barely clinging to life. Amy Carlson died from complications as a result of taking large amounts of colloidal silver, the same remedy she had peddled to countless others, was the thing that killed her. 7 members of the group were charged with gross disrespect of a corpse, spending only a couple of weeks in jail before the charges were dropped. And Miguel Lamboy, the man responsible for the group's success, disappeared with the remaining $300,000 in the Love Has Won accounts. Today, the group is fractured. Group member and live streaming coordinator Aurora abandoned the original YouTube channel and created a spiritual successor called 5D Full Closure, which continued to post videos until August of 2025. Several other members have started popular social media accounts or businesses, but none to this day have reached the infamy that Love Has Won garnered. And I hope for the sake of others, they never do. But what I just covered isn't even half the story. There are so many more details we couldn't include, even with the full treatment. Hundreds of first-hand accounts, thousands of hours of video. There's actually a great documentary by HBO about it, but even they didn't have the runtime to discuss every detail. Needless to say, this rabbit hole goes deep. In the depths of the Love Has Won madness, seemingly has no end. And alright guys, that wraps up some horrifying internet rabbit holes. What did you think about today's video? I thought these were horrifying rabbit holes, to be honest. These were depressing, sad, and just so horrible. I feel so horrible for all the victims involved. Comment down below what you thought about this video. Leave your feedback down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. Follow me on Spotify, follow me on Instagram, all that jazz. And if you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you'll enjoy other videos on the channel, so please check those out. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching. It means the world. And this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're getting into some unnerving Reddit horror stories. You guys have been loving the Reddit horror stories, and I have loved recording them. I love these long story videos. They're so entertaining, scary, weird, and like the title says, unnerving. So These stories will be great and you'll want to stick around. And I just want to say thank you so much for stopping by. It means the world. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Spotify, and like and subscribe here, like I said. And yeah, this video will be long enough already. So without further ado, let's get into some unnerving Reddit horror stories. The Lady Upstairs. Written by LooseAd723. After 36 years of living in an apartment complex, I can confidently attest that a night owl is the worst kind of neighbor. Being as lucky as I am, I had one of those moving into the apartment right above mine at the start of October. It was a lady who seemed to have an endless supply of worldly goods that all needed to be put into place the moment she moved in. Every single evening at 9 p.m. exactly, she would either start hammering away, drilling the walls, or pushing furniture across her floors, always managing to reach the noise level of an angry bull in heat. I have always had quite sensitive ears, so I'm no stranger to being awoken at night because of bothersome noises. There is always noise in the city, whether from drunkards singing at the top of their lungs or nocturnal critters running amok in the streets. Trust me, the sheer number of times I've been woken up by an opossum knocking over a trash can outside my house is ridiculous. The thing is, these disturbances would always be occasional and brief whenever they occurred. I could easily fall back asleep afterwards, but ever since the day that lady moved in, the night has been filled with constant sounds of her mayhem. The cacophony upstairs would go on every evening for about 3 to 4 days in a row. Then at some point, I would hear a large thudding sound, indicating that she had brought out yet another box full of stuff that needed to be set up. This routine sent me into a hellish cycle of exhaustion. I'd fall asleep late and wake up exhausted in the morning. I would then have to drown myself in coffee and go to work, hoping that I could get some sleep later in the evening. Don't tell me that I just should have confronted her. I didn't want her to think I was just some cranky old man. Besides, I don't really like confronting people. I've always felt awful whenever I've had to reprimand someone. I also didn't know her name, which I felt like would have made the interaction even more unbearable. I just sat on my couch, waiting for the commotion to stop. Suddenly, 3 weeks had passed and she showed no signs of being finished unpacking. The seeds of chaos were planted as the clock struck 9 p.m. on an unusually hot evening in late October. An evening so hot that I had to have my windows open to be comfortable. The lady upstairs started toiling away, following her usual schedule. It was just as loud as all the other days. I twisted and turned in my bed, trying to cover my ears with my pillow, as I had done so many nights before. But this night was different. The heat mixed with my drowsiness and the sounds from upstairs all compiled into a thundering migraine. It felt as if my brain was swelling, trying to crack my head open and run away to escape the noise. I couldn't take it any longer. I sat up in my bed, inhaled all the air that I could fit in my lungs, and yelled, "Quiet!" My yelling was followed by a large thud from upstairs. She had just started unpacking another box. I thought to myself, I couldn't believe it. She had to have heard me. My yelling was so loud that they probably heard me all the way up on the 5th floor. I stared at my ceiling, awaiting the sounds of the troublemaker and her orchestra from hell. I waited, and then I waited some more. More time passed, but there were no more sounds coming from upstairs. Maybe she did hear me. Maybe she was finally being respectful. I felt my headache subside as I lay back down. I closed my eyes, letting my fatigue carry me towards slumber. I was completely unbothered for the first time in a long time. I rose with the sun several hours later, and I didn't have to chug half a liter of coffee to stay awake. I went to work with a smile on my face and a good feeling in my body. Everything was easier. I was happier. It was paradise compared to before. I came home that evening, hoping that the night before wasn't an exception. If only I had been that lucky. After the sun had gone down, there was activity in the upstairs apartment again. This time, though, the sounds were a bit different. All I could hear was bump, 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 repeated over and over again. I couldn't place the sound. It didn't come from any tool that I know of. I was sure of that. There were irregular pauses between the sounds, ranging from about 5 seconds to 10 seconds. It wasn't just heavy footsteps, that was for sure. The spaces between them were too big. It wasn't a hammer either. The sounds were much too quiet for that. This thought process continued as I lay in my bed that night, my wary eyes fixated on the ceiling. Maybe she's tapping her foot on the floor to a song, but the sounds are not rhythmical in the slightest. Maybe she's dropping a ball repeatedly, but why would she even do that? Is she a juggler? No, that'd be ridiculous. These were but some of the thoughts rushing through my head as these sounds kept resonating in the background. It was beyond the midnight hours before I fell asleep that night. When I woke up in the morning, the noises had stopped. I assumed that she had just started working on her apartment again. Throughout the whole day, at my work and when I went home, I silently prayed that I wouldn't hear those sounds from her apartment again, even though they were less noisy than normal. There was something about not being able to identify them that just made them much more annoying. To my dismay, however, the noises had begun anew by the rising of the moon. Bump, bump, bump. Lying in my bed that night, I was gritting my teeth out of sheer annoyance. I covered my head with my pillow again, but it was no use. I could still hear the sounds no matter how much I tried to keep them out. They made me feel as if someone was constantly poking at my brain, molding it like a piece of clay. Maybe it was revenge. Maybe, just maybe, she was mad about my yelling and was doing this to get back at me. Maybe she just wanted to drive me nuts with her antics. I tried to fall asleep, but it wasn't happening. The sounds from upstairs echoed in my head, much louder than any of the sounds that had been there in the weeks before. It was pure agony. My heart skipped a beat as my phone started ringing. I cautiously picked it up, wondering who was calling in the middle of the night. Hello? I mumbled. Peterson, where the fuck are you, man? We've been waiting for you for 45 minutes. Oh, hello, sir. I'm sorry, but my shift doesn't start till... I looked towards my window. The rays of sunlight had already broken through and cast light onto my floor. Shit. Sorry, sir. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I said as I got out of bed and hung up the phone. What followed was one of the worst days I've ever had in my life. I was a walking corpse with only one thing on my mind. What were those sounds? I eventually got home and I didn't care about relaxing. Relaxation wasn't even on my mind. All I wanted to do, and all I did, was await the sounds. I sat on my couch, staring at the ceiling, and like clockwork, the commotion started back up late into the evening. Bump, bump, bump. I couldn't take it another night. It was torture. I didn't care what she thought of me anymore. I didn't care about having to scold her. I stormed out of the door and up the stairs and pounded on the door. What is your fucking problem? The sound stopped, but I wasn't satisfied. They were going to start again. I wasn't fooled. I turned the door handle and walked inside. Her apartment was cold like night and as silent as a library. I walked into the living room, and that's where I found her. She was lying on her back at the foot of a small stepladder. She lay beside the corner of a wooden table. The corner was covered in a mixture of dried brown blood and long black hairs. On the side of her head was a crater of blood, hair, skull fragments, and brain matter. Both of her arms were mangled to the bone. A swarm of flies was nesting on her body. The windows in the living room stood open, taking in the autumn breeze and wafting away any smell of rot there should have been. As I stood there, taking it all in, I heard some skittering. I stared in disbelief as a chubby little form crept out from one of the moving crates on the floor, where it had likely been hiding from all the noise I'd made. It was a possum, currently unaware of my presence. It crawled over the body and started gnawing at the hand. Every time the possum ripped off a piece of flesh, the hand was lifted into the air before subsequently dropping to the floor, producing a light bump. I haven't slept since 2023. Written by Sad or Dead. He writes great stories on Reddit, so go check out his page. And now into the story. Growing up, I had two choices in life. I could follow in my father's footsteps as a farm equipment maintenance worker. It was a decent job with decent pay, but I always got this sense of dread whenever I walked by his workshop. It was this big, windowless building in a pale green color, and I always had this feeling that if I stayed there for too long, that place would eat me alive. So I went with the other choice in life, my mother. She was always larger than life, and she wanted me to be too. She was all about the hustle. When she and my father went separate ways, she took me and my sister across the country to Bangkok. She was the embodiment of Ot Prio Wa Kin Wan, roughly translated to endure the sourness and enjoy the sweetness later. She would take any job at any time and claw her way upward. So my sister and I turned out the same. We would work, study, and socialize. We were supposed to be everything at once: smart, strong, cultural, and opinionated. I studied computer science at night and worked delivery during the day. I got a pretty good eye for traffic, so I could make it around the city without fearing for my life. That's easier said than done. Traffic laws around here seem to be more of a suggestion rather than a law. I also did the odd job making websites for friends, family, and acquaintances. That would eat up most of my weekend nights. And finally, the one job that never paid me anything: looking out for my sister. My sister Isra worked as a club and event promoter in the inner city. She mostly worked weekends and nights, and I'm the only one she trusts to watch her back. If someone bothered her, I'd be on call. If she needed a sudden ride home, I'd be on call. I'd get yelled at for being late, or for not responding fast enough, or for 1,000 different reasons. It was by far the worst job I'd ever had. But family is family. I'd be working so much that the only time my friends would see me was when I came around to pick up Asara. They started to call me Lon or Lurk, something you would say when it's time to close for the night. I was the closing time guy. When I showed up, it was time to go home. Not the most fun nickname to be stuck with in your early 20s. When my mother passed away from pancreatic cancer in 2020, I'd just turned 21. I was put in a position where I had to support both myself and my sister economically. Sure, she pulled part of her weight too, but she was looking ahead. She wanted to work in cosmetology, especially in movies and TV shows. That would take money and time. So for a while there, I had a lot of sudden weight put on my shoulders. Studies, work, more work, and being there for Isra. I barely slept, and when I did, I'd wake up at the slightest sound. I was so used to sleeping lightly, waiting for my sister to call for a pickup, but I didn't have a lot of choices. I had to keep going, for everyone's sake. So I made a plan. I just had to make it until I was done with my studies. I looked for temporary solutions. I'd take caffeine pills, but they ended up giving me a stomach ache. I tried this dextrose drink from a local pharmacy, but that thing almost gave me arrhythmia. I didn't want to try any heavier stuff, so I kind of gave up hope. Then I met a guy named Samyat. Samyat is a nice guy in the wrong kind of business. About 10 years older than me, but 30 years older at heart. To this day, I'm not sure what he really does, apart from co-managing a couple of downtown clubs. I think he buys things from places you shouldn't. Some kind of gray area importer. He was a part owner of a club where Isra worked on the weekend. The first time I met him, he was sitting outside the club with a cold beer, having a cigarette. He didn't look like the owner, so I sat down next to him to tie my shoe. He looked me up and down. "You just gonna sit down like that?" he asked. "You got an appointment?" "I need an appointment for a chair?" "For my chair, yeah." "You the boss?" "I'm a boss, yeah." I was too tired to care, and frankly, getting my sister fired from that place would have made my life easier, so I looked right back at him. "You don't look like a boss to me." I didn't know if he was gonna hit me or hire me, but he ended up belly laughing and offering me a cigarette, so I guess I made the right choice. I would spend about 1 or 2 nights a week at Samyat's club. He'd offer me a job, but the pay was awful, and I was busy with other things. I literally didn't have enough hours of the day to work for him. I think that was for the best, though. He was a great guy to hang out with, but he must have been an awful boss. Cheap bastard. Samyat had some sympathy for me, though. I was working hard to make ends meet, and he respected the hustle. He offered me a couple of side gigs. For example, picking up leftover credit cards at ATMs. There's a kind of ATM that takes a long time for the card to come back out, so a lot of tourists think it ate them, so they leave the card behind. Samyat paid a little for each card I could bring him, so I would walk around and pick them up while waiting for Isra to finish work. Every little bit helps. We developed a good friendship. I would show up an hour or so before Isra needed to pick up just to hang out with Samyat. We'd usually talk just about movies, cars, girls, whatever came to mind. I didn't have a lot of people in my life I could just talk to about nothing. And I didn't think he did either. We'd usually end up having a beer and chew beetle nuts. They're these nuts that wrap in a leaf and chew. It gives you a pick-me-up that makes your mouth burn. It sums up Samyat pretty well. Legal, but spicy. But things took a turn when I was invited to a private party of his. See, I'd been up for 27 hours straight at that point. I've been working on a large project for my computer science class, and I've been hoping to get a couple of extra hours in at the delivery company. That, and a client needed me to redo their homepage after it got hacked. It was a perfect storm of a lot of little things all at once, and it drove me to exhaustion. But I still got to Samyat's party. He had a nice place outside of town. He'd invited some people from the club and some business associates. He had these parties about once every 6 months or so. It was a way to show appreciation and brag a little. Still, Samyat had pulled out all the stops. He'd felt sorry for me, seen me work so hard, and he'd brought a guy there from a research institute. He needed people for a data entry job, and he thought it'd be my kind of thing. Problem is, I was so tired I looked like I was on drugs. I didn't even understand the guy was offering me a paid position. As the party died down, Samyat took me aside and sat me down for a chat. We chewed some beetle nuts and he took off his sunglasses. The man didn't look me in the eyes a lot, so I knew something was up. "I worry about you," he said. "You're working too hard." I'm sorry," I said. "It's not that I don't appreciate this, but I just had so much to do." "Then tell me," he continued. "Tell me how I can help." "You don't need to do anything," I said. "I'm just glad to have a friend, you know?" I could see the wheels turn in his head. His eyes welled up a little. He gave me a hug and took me out of the veranda overlooking the city. He patted me on the back. "You deserve better," he said. "I'll get you something better." The following weekend, I got a text from Samyat. He was excited to show me something. He usually had something to share, but this time seemed different. I was a bit anxious about seeing him, but it was a nice change of pace. So that Saturday, I was invited into the club. I went straight past the bouncer, through the dance floor, and into the back rooms. From there, I followed a corridor to a small office at the back of the building. After all I'd seen from Samyat, I expected something grander, but it was just a little office with an old laptop, a USB fan, a couple chairs, and a shitty TV in the corner, all accentuated by a couple of early 2000s posters of women in bikinis posing with cars. Samyat was smiling ear to ear and waved me over. He opened a safe under his desk and pulled out a small box of white pill bottles. They were all sealed and unmarked, except for a small blue sunflower print on the cap. He sat me down and took a bottle out of his pocket to show me. "This is gonna help," he said. "Trust me. I don't do drugs, boss." "I know you don't. This isn't that." He showed me his phone and a conversation he'd had with the guy from the party, the one from the research institute. Apparently, he'd managed to get his hands on a couple of cases of an off-market stimulant. "I tried it myself," he said. "Going on 2 weeks now. It's a little miracle." "What does it do? What's the catch?" "No need to sleep anymore," he smiled. "1 pill, you're good to go for at least 18 hours. "No way. You might need another hour or so to recover when you finally go to bed, but apart from that, it's perfect. Doesn't make your piss smell, doesn't fuck up your hair, nothing." "No way," I repeated. Too good to be true. Samyat sat down at his desk across from me, giving me a long look. "You won't let me get you a better job," he said. "Let me get you this, as a friend." I could tell he was being genuine. You could say a lot about Samyat, but he'd always been honest with me. I swallowed my fears and picked up one of the pills. I don't know," I said. "There's got to be a catch." "Never more than 1 a day," he said, "or you'll get sick. And no more than 2 days at a time, maybe 3, but then you'll probably get a headache. Oh, and no drugs." "What do you mean?" "There's a list of things drugs it reacts with, but you don't do that stuff, so you're good." "What about caffeine?" "As long as you don't pour stuff like..." Samyat picked up a small piece of paper and looked it over, reading from the list, and then a bunch of different hard drugs, crystal, booger sugar, etc. "There goes my Friday night." "Funny," Samyat scoffed. "If you don't want it, it's fine, but..." No, I'll try one." And so I did. Taking that first pill was like breathing in after a deep dive. I felt lighter, but not high. I was just well rested, ready to take on the day. But there was also a slight chill to it, like a cold breath sweeping across my nerves. I looked at Samyat like I was seeing him for the first time. He got up and slapped his hands together with a grin. "I knew it," he said. "I knew this would be it." "How much?" I asked. "For a bottle, how much?" "Take it," he smiled, pushing over the whole case. Guy owed me a favor. "Really? You're giving it away?" "I'm just glad to have a friend." That night was the first time I stuck around to party with Samyat. For real. The man was a force of nature. He downed shots like they were water. He knew all the best food vendors on the block by name, and he'd ping-pong from after party to after party without breaking a sweat. I was just along for the ride. We ended up drunk on a beach, watching the sunrise. Not a blink of tiredness in our eyes. Our day was just getting started. No need for beetle nuts to keep us going. I wouldn't need those ever again. "Next, you're gonna get a woman," he murmured. "Then a job, a great job. You can fix anything, huh? That's why I'm the boss." "No, I don't want to owe you anything," I said. "You get that, right?" "You don't owe me anything." Kind of feels like I do. He asked me to show him the phone. I did. And he scrolled down to his number on the contact list. He tapped it, hovering his finger over the delete button. "You can delete me today and never call me again, and that's up to you." "Really?" Really. He handed me the phone back and turned his attention to the sun. But for as long as you feel like it, I'm here, he continued. No strings. No strings? He shrugged and slid his final beer my way. It's just nice to be the good guy for once. The next day, lying in my bed, I was scared. I had no idea how my body would respond. It was a make or break moment where I'd find out if Samyat had screwed me over or if he'd really helped me out. I had a whole case of those pills stashed away in the closet, more than enough to keep me going for months. But I took his advice. Every 2 or 3 days or so, I'd give it a rest. So when I went to sleep that night, I didn't know what to expect. I had strange dreams. I dreamt I woke up in this barren world with a dead tree towering in the distance. There were no stars in the sky. It was desolate, but peaceful in a way. And I dreamt that there was someone there, in the dark. Someone looking for me. But I woke up long before they found me. I was a bit worked up, but it was just a dream. Those fleeting images rolled out of my mind faster than it took me to make breakfast. From that moment on, I decided to give these things a go. I would rest every 3 days or so, but until then, I was constantly on the go. I could work as many hours as I wanted. I could be up all night finishing projects left and right. I never missed a call from Asira. I could keep up with demands, and I could do it comfortable, without side effects. Sure, whenever I crashed, I'd dream about that place again. The dead tree, reaching for the moon, the desolate ruins, and somewhere out in the eternal night, something was looking for me, but it never had the time to find me. I'd always wake up long before it did. It was comfortable, efficient, and I could do it all. I had time to work a little with Samyat. Not anything big, but just little odd jobs here and there. He was fair, but didn't pay much. But then again, I was making more money than I knew how to spend. I got a second chance at an interview with Samyat's guy at the Research Institute, and that time around, I nailed it. It was just a low-level data entry job, but I could do it remotely, and it paid almost twice as much as my delivery job. I had to brush up on my English, but that wasn't a big deal. Isra and I had to learn it early on in our lives. My mother made sure of it. Isra had saved up enough money for her cosmetology classes, so I got some more time to focus on other things. I invested some time in a startup app with some guys from my classes, and we made some solid progress. Overall, things looked pretty good. Weeks turned into months, and months eventually turned into an entire year. I still had plenty of pills left, and I got into a healthy routine. I slept better, I ate better, and I had so much more time on my hands. It got to the point where I couldn't imagine going back to life without those pills. Still, I couldn't help but wonder what that place in between the wakeful world and my dreams was. That place in the starless night with the dead tree in the distance. Who were the dark shapes roaming the fields of black sand, and who was out there looking at me? I wouldn't think about it too much. I chalked it up as a weird side effect, but not much else. It didn't affect my everyday life, so why should I care? Fast forward to 2023. I was co-owner of a small company. No more data entry. We had an office and 5 employees. My nickname still stuck around, but it was more or less sarcastic. I was no longer the guy who showed up at the end of it all. I was the first in line. I would plan my come downs in a way that people never noticed. I had this reputation of working around the clock, and people just couldn't figure it out. I didn't share my secret with anyone. I figured there'd be some serious consequences if those pills got in the wrong hands. My sister worked a nice job at one of the local malls. One of the really big ones. Not just any old mall. It was very well paid. And she could support herself more than enough. She ended up moving in with the guy, and I got a place of my own. I could finally take a step up and get myself something nice. I still spent time with Samyat. He was the only other person in the world that knew of the pills. He'd stopped taking them though. He found them too distracting when it came to keeping a schedule. He was going steady with a lady named Wan, and he hated seeing her go to bed on her own. It was surprisingly sweet. And more pills for me, so win-win. In February of 2023, my sister got married. It was bad timing since I had a huge project to work on at the time. So even with all my available time, it was still not enough. So I had to do something Samyat advised against. I had to keep going for 5 days straight. Just 2 days more than the ordinary 3, but still. Now I didn't immediately notice anything. It worked just fine. But when I finally crashed, after almost a full week without sleep, I had the most awful nightmares of my life. Not only was I back there, in that desolate space, I could feel it. The black sand creeping into my shoes. The howling of people in pain. I thought I heard gunfire too. What little vegetation lived there was twisted into a midnight blue, just like the blue sunflower on the cap of the bottle. But this time, there wasn't just something in the dark looking for me. No, it was hunting. I have this vivid memory of crawling through the sands of an old ruin, hearing something closing in. Despite the sand, it was wet, vicious. It made this disgusting sound, like a crowd of large men struggling for breath all at once. I would hear it touch its way across the ruins, looking for me, and everywhere it touched, something sizzled, like burning acid. It tried to speak. I know it did, but it couldn't. It had too many tongues, and they all tried to speak at once. Eventually, it found me. I couldn't look, I couldn't breathe. I could feel the size of it without even looking as it loomed over me. I tried making myself small, but it didn't matter. It sighed, like it had enjoyed a cold glass of water on a warm summer's day. It was so pleased to find me. And as it moved closer, I heard something dripping, sizzling into the sand. There was a powerful smell of ammonia and something akin to mothballs. It touched my arm, and it burned into my skin. It burned so bad that I woke up. And when I did, I had a burn. A coin-sized black mark with gangrenous flesh tightening the skin of the arm, stinging with every flex of my tricep. That place was real. That thing had to be real. For a full week after that, I kept feeling like I'd been seconds from death. I had a doctor check out my arm, but he couldn't make sense of it. It was an acid burn, but it behaved like a frostbite. In the end, he had to make a small procedure to remove the dead skin, but it was overall fine. I just had to keep it clean and bandaged and be prepared for a nasty scar. But that thing had been so vivid. Days later, I could still smell it. I remember this one time when I was taking a shower, when I had to turn off the water. I thought I heard something sizzling in the other room. Wrapped in a towel, I peeked through the door, hoping against hope that I was just being paranoid. This time, I was, but what about next time? I swore off the pills. I was in a good place and I didn't need them anymore. I'd gained everything I wanted. Sure, it'd take some time to get back to a normal schedule, but I couldn't go back there. No wonder we weren't supposed to take more than 2 or 3 pills in a sequence. If I'd been there a second longer, it would have taken my whole arm. Another hour and I'd be dead. I decided to give it all back to Samyat. By that time, he had expanded his business a bit, but he'd calmed down as a person. He was a changed man. He was engaged to Wan, and he was trying to turn his life around. In fact, we hadn't seen each other for some time. He was a bit surprised when I called about meeting him in his office. I met Samyat in his downtown office late one Friday night. It was a strange feeling. There were people everywhere, but I still felt like I was alone. There was this thought crawling around in the back of my head, whispering to me that if I slowed down and really listened, I could hear that sizzling acid as it burned into the asphalt. So I kept my head down and tried to get into the music, the bass, the beat of the party, but it was all just superficial. I couldn't help but think back on that thing. Every time I heard a cough, a sneeze, someone clearing their throat, I thought that was it. It found me. I could feel the squelch of it in my ear, almost like a heat. But I made my way through the club and joined Samyat in his office. I put the pills on his desk and sat down across from him. "I'm done with them," I said. "They do something to you?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. I'm just done." "All right, no worries," Samyat nodded. "You okay?" "Not really." Despite not hanging out for a while, Samyat was his usual self. He put the pills away, sat down next to me, and handed me a beer. He'd installed a mini fridge next to his desk. The damn thing made more noise than a ceiling fan. "I'm not gonna ask about it," he said. "You look like shit. I feel like shit. What happened to your arm?" "Frostbite." Samyat snorted but saw that I wasn't laughing. He opened his mouth but closed it again. Whatever had happened to me, he knew better than to laugh. Instead, he leaned over, looking worried. "Fuck the pills," he said. "You're sticking with me now, all right?" "All right." He made his best effort to keep me company that night. We had drinks, met some people, and sang some karaoke. I almost got into an arm wrestling competition with a drunk Dutch guy. It was nice, and for a moment, I didn't hear those awful noises. I didn't smell those awful smells. Later that night, I could feel myself growing tired. Usually, I would just pop one of the pills, but I settled for a classic instead. Beetle nuts. Samya and I wrapped them up and bit down. It was nice to feel that familiar crunch and burn. It was a return to form in a way. It was the way things were supposed to be. By the end of the night, we ended up on that same bench, watching the sun. But this time, he was exhausted. He was nodding off over and over as he waited for a friend to pick him up. I was, strangely, not tired in the slightest. "Maybe you still got some of it in your system," Samyat mumbled. "Makes sense, right? I mean, bigger doses, take longer." "Probably," I nodded. "Or maybe it was the nuts." "Nah, they don't work like that. They're a kick, not a trip." By the time Samyat's friend came around to pick him up, he could barely keep his eyes open. He lumbered into the passenger seat and looked back at me one final time. "I'm getting rid of them," he said. "Don't worry, it's done. You'll be fine." But I wasn't feeling fine. Or rather, I was, but that was the problem. I went home and I still couldn't sleep. I went an entire day and I still couldn't sleep. I hadn't taken any pills for some time, but I was still up and about. I was getting worried, but I didn't know where to turn. Had I taken a pill by accident? I reached out to Samyat's contact at the Research Institute, but we couldn't talk about it over email since it was monitored, and this was hardly legal, so we decided to meet downtown later in the week. For the next few days, I was a wreck. I kept thinking about that place and that thing. I'd been up for so many days that I didn't want to think about what would happen when I returned. It would be waiting for me. I could feel it, hear it. I met the man from the Research Institutes in early morning. I paid for his coffee, but I didn't get any myself. He was an American in his 50s with a shaved head and a well-trimmed goatee. He hid behind a black baseball cap and wasn't much for small talk. I decided to get right to it. I explained the problem. After taking a larger than usual dose, I couldn't sleep anymore. He didn't look that surprised. "That only happens when you take stimulants," he said. "Didn't he warn you?" "I haven't taken anything," I said. "I don't do drugs." "You sure?" he asked. "Nothing." "Does alcohol count?" I asked. "Beetle nuts, caffeine?" What? No, that... He stopped for a second. His eyes turned away as he thought about it. He brought out his phone and checked something, then nodded. Beetle nuts, he nodded. That's high in arcoline. High in what? Arcoline. That's the first thing on the list. That's the worst one. Wait, what? He adjusted his glasses and read the list out loud. He was right. Arcoline was the first thing on the list, right there next to hard narcotics. What does it mean? I asked. What's going to happen? He leaned forward, looking over the edge of his silver-rimmed glasses. Arcoline amplifies the effect by a magnitude of about 100. It's one of the reasons they had to shut down the development. At that magnitude, there's no telling what's going to happen. Wait, 100? So you're going to be awake for maybe a year, maybe 4, and then something I can't even imagine is going to happen to you. There was nothing else to say. He had no advice to give. There were no solutions. The damage was done. I almost burst into tears right then and there. My hands were shaking. I would be awake for years, and then something he couldn't even imagine. If the effect of 2 pills, too many, caught me a burn on the arm, what the hell was going to happen after 100, 200? The bandage itched, and I could hear the sizzling from a nearby kitchen. But it wasn't from the kitchen. It was that thing. And it was waiting for me. It was just a matter of time. I tried everything, but there was nothing to be done. There was nothing wrong with me on paper. I was healthier than ever, in fact. The lab in Vietnam that the man spoke of had been shut down, and all traces of it was dismantled. I had a vague lead to an investor in the US, but it didn't lead me anywhere. I had to sell my share in my company. It stung, but the payout was more than generous. It would keep me afloat for a couple of months, maybe a year, while I tried to work something out. But it was a desperate search for nothing. Even the man from the research institute would drop off the grid. And when strange men in suits started asking my friends and family about me, I knew I'd taken a step too far. This was in February 2023. Every day from that point forward has been a nightmare. In May that same year, I lost the need to eat. It's like my body entered a kind of metastasis. I could sit in a room for days on end, staring at a wall, and nothing would change. I would feel nothing. I would experience nothing, and I wouldn't care. And with no food, I'd need no bathroom breaks. Sometime in July, I lost the need to breathe. I'd forget to do it for days on end, and my lungs would deflate to the point where it hurt to use them. After a couple of weeks, I couldn't talk without bleeding anymore. In late October that year, I stopped blinking. I'd forget to do it for long periods of time, and dust would settle in my eyes. It didn't hurt, but it was uncomfortable to wash them, so I just ended up keeping them closed. Something happened to my skin. I think it stopped needing sunlight. Over a couple of days, I grew so pale you could almost see through me. My fingernails would fall off without using my mouth and jaw. My teeth fell out of my skull. I barely noticed. I had to move in with my sister to care for me. She couldn't understand what was happening, and neither could anyone else. She would force me to go to the doctors, and they couldn't make sense of it. Whenever they mentioned specialists, some anonymous group would throw enough money at them to look the other way. But all that was just cake topping. It was all just physical things. It didn't compare to my thoughts and feelings. I would feel closer and closer to that dark space. That space beyond, where that thing waited for me. It hungered for me. All the needs and wants I'd lost, it gained. It was hungry, tired, sunburnt, and in constant pain. And it wanted to give it all back to me, to consume me with it. If I just listened hard enough, I could hear it panting. like an eager dog waiting for master to put food in his bowl, ready to tear into me, unashamed. Sometimes I forget what world I'm in. I'll get up and wander around, feeling the walls, imagining them as crumbling ruins. My sister once caught me wandering into the street. If my lungs had worked, she would have heard me begging that thing to leave me. Instead, I got hit by a car, and I didn't feel a thing. Laying crumpled into a pile by the side of the road. The things people say feel like a distant dream. I have no need for serotonin, so joy is something of the past. Sometimes I can hear the music and cheering across the city, but it feels like they're mocking me. But the fear, that's still there. It may be the only emotion that remains. Now it's 2025. I think I attended Samyat's wedding, but I can't know for sure. I think I was there. I didn't see or hear. I can't feel anything when I move my arms anymore. There was a nice smell. I think he offered me some cake. I tried to smile at him, but I don't know if I did it. I've written this with great effort over several weeks. My sister has helped. She washes my eyes, and I'll look at the letters for her to type. If I stretch a little, I can get enough air in my lungs to make a noise or a short word. Sometimes at night, when my sister is not here, I think I can hear something outside. Not just in my mind, but on the street. I think they're watching me. I think they're curious about what happens when I go to sleep. Or maybe they're scared. It's funny in a way. They called me Lurk. Closing time. It's fitting. I can't help but think I should have stayed with my father, maintaining farm equipment. I wish I could dream of seeing those pale green walls again. I had to finish this in a hurry. I think the effect is wearing off, like the man said it would. Yesterday, I yawned. Today, I'm tired. Good night, Bangkok. The Worth of a Life by Rain. What would it take for you to kill a man? Excuse me? I asked, taken off guard. A stranger in an expensive-looking suit sat across from me at the bus stop. What would it take for you to kill a man? He repeated. Why are you asking me this? I asked, increasingly unsettled. He leaned back against the bench casually, as if he were simply asking for the time. Because I want to know, David, he said, his face expressionless. How do you know my name? I asked, a chill running through me. This was getting creepy. Who are you? The stranger leaned forward and looked me in the eye. His stare was cold and unwavering. I know everything about you, David, he said, not offering his own name. I know that you are drowning in student loans. They had to sell your car, that you live from one meager paycheck to the next. He leaned back and looked away. I want to know what it would take for you to kill a man, he finished. This guy was seriously freaking me out, and I wanted to run or call the police, but I was afraid of what he might do. He was obviously some kind of psychopath. I decided to humor him carefully until the bus came, just in case. Why would I ever kill someone? I asked. Aside from self-defense, I don't see how that could ever be worth it. You have a gun, and someone is kneeling in front of you, he said. What if pulling that trigger would save 1,000,000 lives? Would you do it? A psychopathic philosopher? So, the trolley problem? I asked cautiously. Switching the tracks to save 1,000,000 people by sacrificing one? The stranger waved a dismissive hand. You could think of it that way, he said. But it doesn't necessarily have to be 1,000,000 people. It could be for anything. Power, money, even the cure for cancer. I never liked the trolley problem. It was always an impossible choice for me. I wouldn't be able to decide, I said, shrugging. Luckily, I'll never have to. He leaned forward again. But what if you do? He said. What if I make the power to make it happen? This guy is insane, I thought. You have the power, I asked, exasperated. If so, why not do it yourself? Why would you make a random person kill someone to cure cancer? I can't do it myself, he replied. I'm unable to directly interfere. I can only act when someone, of their own free will, and by their own hand, provides me with a soul to do so. I leaned back and crossed my arms. Prove it, I said. Prove that you have the power to do this. Like I said, I'm unable to act, he said. However, I can tell you that when you were 10 years old, you found a frog in a secluded field. You named him Jim. You would return weekly to see him until one day he was no longer there. You had a crush on Jenny in high school, he continued. You still think about her. You want to call her, but keep putting it off. You're planning to visit your brother's grave tomorrow, he said. 2 days ago, a conversation with a coworker reminded you of him. You were going to buy flowers later today from the florist on 7th Avenue. Is this satisfactory? The stranger asked. I sat there, frozen in shock. I had never told anyone about any of that. Ever. No one knew but me. It was impossible. Undeniable proof was staring me in the face. There was no other way that he could have known. It took me a moment to find my voice. Okay, I said shakily. So you need me to kill someone? Kill one person to save others? What you kill for is up to you, he said. You can receive anything you wish. The stranger stood up. You have 20 minutes to decide, he said, looking down at me. You will never have this opportunity again. Think carefully. He turned and pointed. In that alley, where I am pointing, he said, you will find a man. I turned to look at the alley. It was right next to the bus stop. He continued, you will also find a gun. State your desire loudly and clearly before pulling the trigger. He lowered his hand and turned to leave. Decide what you kill for. Decide the worth of a life. The stranger started walking away. Remember, 20 minutes, he said, his voice fading. Will you pull the trigger? I looked at my watch, then slumped back on the bench, overwhelmed. What should I do, I thought. Was there actually a man in that alley? A man who would live or die depending on my decision? Was it worth of a life? Was it more lives? I could save the unsavable, cure the uncurable, find the cure for cancer, fix climate change, discover the secret to immortality, a world without suffering. Just one life lost to save countless others. But what about money? I could be rich, never work another day in my life, debt erased, no longer struggling, barely making enough to survive, a life of unparalleled luxury. For one pull of the trigger. Power, I could rule nations, change the course of history, every law, every war, every scientific pursuit guided by my hand. No one could stop me. Unmatched potential achieved by removing another's. My thoughts were racing. What about the person I would kill? Did they have family? Friends? Were they like me? With their own hopes and dreams? Their entire life gone with one bullet. It would be my fault. It would be my decision that they should die. Their innocent blood would be on my hands. Forever. 15 minutes had passed. Do the ends justify the means? Should I kill them? Or do the means justify the ends? Should I let them live? I kept looking at the alley. I had never been so stressed in my entire life. I could barely think. I had to decide. I had to decide now. I jumped up and started walking toward the alley. There was no choice. I had to do this. The world would be a better place in exchange for one single life. My steps carried me closer. It had to be done. I would make sure they were remembered forever as a hero. Someone who saved the world. Just do it. Keep walking. My heart was aching, tearing itself apart. Get there. Pull the trigger. My legs were so heavy. And a life. I struggled to keep moving. I was almost there. I have to. 10 feet from the alley, my legs gave out. I fell to my knees. Tears rolled down my face. I couldn't breathe. I looked down at my hands. They were blurry, shaking uncontrollably. It was too much. I can't do it, I whispered, sobbing. I can't do it. I couldn't kill someone for a world they would never see. My decision was made. I would not pull the trigger. Trying to control my trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and called the police. It was clear to me now. It couldn't be measured. The worth of a life. Soon after, the police arrived. They couldn't find the stranger I'd been talking to. They did, however, find someone in the alley. Someone holding a gun, waiting for me. There's something in the forest pretending to be a person by decisive unluckiness. The bus ride out was long and quiet. I spent most of it either staring out the window or drifting in and out of sleep. I was the last one aboard after a few passengers trickled off in small rural towns. The bus suddenly came to a halt, and a distraught man got aboard. He stumbled down the aisle, sat across from me, and began to scribble intently into a battered, leather-bound book. He looked older, maybe in his 60s, tired-looking, wearing well-worn and dirty hiking gear. He spent the whole ride either writing or flipping through the pages. About an hour before my stop, the bus driver called out, "Rainham National Park Ranger Station." The man abruptly stood up and rushed to the front of the bus. He searched his pockets frantically, then slapped some loose change onto the fare counter before darting off without saying a word. Sometime later, the bus driver called out my stop. As I was about to exit, I noticed that the man from earlier had, in his hurry, left his book on the seat behind the driver. I figured I'd keep it safe. If I saw him again on the trail, I could return it, or I could hand it over to the rangers on my way back home. The trail was empty except for the occasional deer or rabbit darting between the trees. I spent hours listening to the crunch under my boots, bird calls, and the rustle of leaves and pine needles. As the sun crept closer to the horizon, I figured it was time to set up my camp for the night. I found a suitable spot next to a small stream and began unpacking my backpack. I set up my tent, gathered some firewood, and boiled water from the stream to rehydrate a freeze-dried meal. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the temperature began to sink. I tucked myself into my sleeping bag, but I couldn't shake the urge I had been trying to ignore all evening. I glanced over at the book sitting half buried in the open lid of my pack. I reached for it and flipped to the first few pages. The handwriting was compact but neat. It started off like any trail journal. Short entries about trail conditions, notes on the weather, and a few sketches of flowers. One entry even described a fox encounter in surprisingly poetic detail. I had just turned to another page when I heard a voice call out, "Hello? Anyone there?" I slowly unzipped the tent and poked my head out. In the dim glow of the dying embers, I could just make out the outline of a man standing a few meters away. Sorry to bother you. I noticed your fire, the man said. Would you mind if I pitch my tent here? It's getting late and I'd rather not stumble around looking for another spot in the dark. Out here, hospitality felt less like a choice and more like an unspoken rule. Sure, plenty of space, I answered hesitantly. He crouched and began to stir the fire with a practiced hand. With a few quick motions, he coaxed the embers back into a flame. The fire blared brighter than it had all evening, crackling and alive again, pushing back the shadows and fully illuminating his face. He looked to be in his 50s, nearly bald with small patches of hair clinging to his scalp, dark rings around his eyes, and an unshaven jaw. His clothes were covered in dried mud. He smiled faintly. Hope you don't mind, he said, glancing up at me. He lowered himself onto a rock across from me and warmed his hands over the fire. My name's Eric, he said. After a moment, you been out here long? I'm John, first day out here. You? Long enough, he replied with a chuckle. Well, I don't want to keep you up all night. I crawled back into my sleeping bag as he pitched his tent next to mine. The last thing I saw before I drifted off to sleep was his silhouette, sitting perfectly still by the fire. Morning, I mumbled, stepping out of my tent. A small kettle of water hissed quietly on a makeshift grate over the flames. I didn't hear you get up. He glanced at me with a practiced smile. Got up early and figured I'd boil some water for your coffee. I froze. How do you know I drink coffee in the morning? I recognized the acidic scent on your breath yesterday. Figured you'd want the water ready. His tone remaining nonchalant. Some habits are hard to miss. I rummaged through my pack and pulled out the small tin of instant coffee. Well, I've got some bread too if you want some. Eric shook his head. Thanks, but I've already eaten. He poured the hot water into 2 cups and I stirred some powdered coffee into mine. I reached to pour some into Eric's cup, but he quickly lifted his cup of plain, hot water to his mouth and drank it in one swift motion. Perhaps he prefers tea though, I thought. Breakfast done, we put out the fire and efficiently packed up the tents and gear. The morning light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. I unfurled my map and compass and started to plot a course to the next campsite, when I felt Eric put his hand on my shoulder. I know the way, he said simply. There was no arrogance in his tone, only a certainty that left no room for discussion. The air was crisp and birds called sporadically from the treetops. Eric moved with an ease that made it clear he was more than comfortable here, navigating rocks and inclines without hesitation. We hiked for hours in silence. Curiously, Eric fell back to walk behind me, occasionally offering directions or commenting on my footing. At first, I thought he might just have been giving me some space, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he either wanted to watch me or didn't want me to watch him. The forest seemed to respond to our passage. The rustle of leaves was quieter, and the birds that had greeted the morning had gone silent. Eventually, the urge to pee forced me to set my backpack down, and I walked behind a nearby tree. When I returned, I noticed the main component zipper on my backpack was pulled down just a crack. Need anything for my pack? I asked Eric. I looked at your compass to make sure we're heading the right way. Not wanting to antagonize my new hiking companion out in the middle of nowhere, I gave him a nod, and we pressed on. The path gradually widened into a clearing, and the new campsite lay ahead. I unpacked my tent while Eric built the fire with practiced motions. Here, let me help you with that, Eric said quietly and came over to me. He grabbed the tent stakes and drove them into the dirt with his bare, flat palm. Seeing my surprise, he patted my back, his hand feeling cold, even through the fabric of my shirt. He returned to the fire, sitting perfectly still and watching me with unnervingly attentive eyes. As we waited for the water to boil for supper, I retrieved the leather-bound book from my backpack. As I flipped it open, I noticed Eric's eyes slightly widen, a flicker of recognition that vanished as quickly as it appeared. He shifted back into his usual posture, hands resting on his knees, and fixed his gaze on the flames. Settling back against a log, I flipped to where I left off that evening before and continued to read. October 4th, 2025. We made good time to the first campsite, arriving well before sunset. A great start to our 5-day loop. Clear sky, light wind from the west. A gunshot woke me up after midnight. Eric's bag was empty. I called for him and received no response. He came out of the dark a few minutes later, said he'd had to scare off a bear lurking around the camp. We'll take a look around the area first thing in the morning. October 5th, 2025. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary around the camp. Found prints, not from a bear though. Eric's been mostly quiet. Says he slept badly. Air heavy with thunderclouds on the horizon, but the storm never came in. Trail mostly dry. October 6th, 2025. I haven't seen Eric eat or drink since yesterday morning. He waved off breakfast. At the stream, he didn't refill his bottle. At lunch, he said he wasn't hungry. Maybe he's queasy. I tried to bring up some old stories. He seemed oddly curious, like it was the first time he had heard them. Didn't add details or correct me the way he always does. Just watched the firewood collapse to coals. Otherwise, it was very humid and a full moon helped to light up the forest at night. October 7th, 2025. I woke up twice last night. Eric was still up. I don't think he noticed me. I decided to confront him this morning about his strange behavior. He just sat there, expressionless. I've noticed that his reactions always come a second too late, like he's trying to figure out how he should respond correctly. His skin looks different too. New wrinkles, a slight yellow tone, and his hair has started to fall out. My only explanation is that something might have poisoned him. October 8th, 2025. It doesn't eat, doesn't sleep, doesn't blink. There is no soul behind its eyes. It just sits by the fire and watches. I cut a hole in the back of my tent. Tonight, I'm leaving. I looked up from the journal and met Eric's eyes across the fire. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, without breaking eye contact, he said calmly, "The water is ready." My hand shook as I fumbled with a pack of dried chicken and poured in the hot water. The plastic crinkled loudly in the silence. Eric shifted slightly, the firelight flickering across his face. He opened a small pack of chicken, picked out the pieces of meat with his bare, dirty fingers, rinsed off the sauce in the boiling water, and swallowed the pieces whole. After some time, he spoke. "These woods are old. They have stories if you know how to listen." "What kind of stories?" I asked, careful to not let my unease show. "Well, there's one about a creature that's been here longer than any map or trail. Most people think it's just a local legend, but I've seen signs that suggest otherwise." He leaned forward, and for a moment his face held what might have been a look of sorrow. "They say a long time ago, there was a man who lived not far from here, a hunter, clever and strong, but with a hunger in him that no food could satisfy. He began to hunt not for deer, not rabbit, but people. Travelers, wanderers, anyone foolish enough to stray too far into the woods. He ate their flesh, wore their skin, and thought himself above the laws of men. For his crimes, God, or maybe something older, cursed him to walk the forest forever, never resting, never belonging. To torment him further, they say he was given a gift. He could take the shape of any man or woman and wear any face he desired. I could study them, live beside them, almost fool himself into believing he was human again. Almost. Eric stirred the fire with a stick. No matter how much he learned how to laugh, how to cry, or how to tell stories, something always betrayed him. His reflection came back wrong. His eyes were void of a soul. And when people noticed, when they looked too closely, well, he had to feed. He paused, letting the silence fill the clearing. They say he still walks these woods, listening, learning, hoping that someone will mistake him for a human. Yes, spooky story, I muttered, no longer able to meet his eyes. My mind raced. Should I make a move, bolt into the forest and risk being caught in the dark, or stay and act like nothing had changed? Every instinct screamed to run, yet my body was frozen in place like a statue. I studied the features of my companion, and with every glance, my stomach twisted tighter. His skin was pale and patchy, loose in some places, and stretched too tightly over bone in others. Yellowed with hints of purple bruising around his neck. It looked as though it had begun the early stages of decomposition. Even his breathing seemed off, shallow and deliberate, as though he were carefully measuring the amount of air in each inhale. And yet, I had been blind to the truth, staring me in the face. I curled my hands in a fist to keep the shaking from showing, forced myself to breathe evenly and to keep my expression neutral. My mind raced to find the right words, a way to break the tension. I rubbed at my eyes, feigning a tired yawn, and muttered something about turning in early, hoping that my voice didn't reveal the dread that had solidified inside me. Just as my mind had started to pick apart the inconsistencies of his disguise, I couldn't help but wonder if he could do the same to me. I slipped into my tent and pulled the zipper closed with slow, careful hands. My fingers shook as I unfolded the map, the paper crackling far too loudly. I traced the lines with a finger, estimating the nearest road at just over 40 kilometers away. The problem was, I couldn't even be sure of our location. Having followed Eric's lead the entire day, it was also a day's trek in daylight, let alone in the middle of the night, but it was the only chance I had. Essentially only flashlight, compass, map, knife, water bottle, protein bars, matches, and the journal. I stuffed them all into a small drawstring sack that usually held my sleeping bag. Impelled by the journal entries, I carefully drew the knife from its sheath. I gripped the knife with both hands to steady it and pressed the steel into the tense nylon until it parted with a faint hiss. I eased myself through the slit, every rustle of the fabric thunderous to my ears, and slipped into the darkness just beyond the firelight. The forest stretched on without end. The only sounds were my rasped breath and the thud of my heartbeat. Beneath it, faint at first, there was something else, a low murmur at the edge of hearing, like someone whispering in the distance. As I ran closer, the sound grew into the unmistakable rush of water. The river was wider than I'd hoped. The moonlight glinted across the surface, silver streaks breaking into shards where the current churned. I hesitated at the riverbank, weighing whether to wade through the freezing water or search for a way around, when a sudden crash echoed from the direction I had come, twigs snapping, branches splintering. Something was moving fast and coming straight towards me. I ripped the sack from my shoulders and hurled it across the water. It landed with a thud on the gravel on the far shore. I stepped into the water. The cold was immediate and brutal, stabbing like needles up my legs. The current nearly swept me off my feet. It wrenched a boot loose from my left foot and dragged it downstream. I waded toward a massive tangle of driftwood caught against some rocks. My body pressed against the slick wood as I slowly submerged myself until only my eyes broke the surface. I forced myself to stay still, every muscle locked. It crawled from the trees on all fours, its limbs bending in impossible directions, moving with an unnatural elasticity. Its spine arched grotesquely, inverted like a demonic contortionist. Eric's head was twisted around on its own neck with eyes staring forward. It waded into the water, coming straight toward my hiding spot, each step deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. It stopped and jerked upright, like a dog catching a scent. It sniffed the air and slowly tilted its head downstream. In a sudden blur of motion, it bolted in that direction, thrashing through the water with a speed that defied anything human. I dragged myself from the freezing water and stumbled onto the shore. I collapsed for a moment on the gravel, heaving for air. I slowly managed to stand up, hoisted the sack over my shoulder, and staggered into the trees. My left foot, now only protected by a wet wool sock, hurt with every misstep. Jolts of pain shot up my leg as I stepped on a sharp rock or a pointy twig. I leaned against a tree and slid down until my back rested firmly against the bark. I needed warmth and dry clothing, but a campfire would likely act as a beacon to my location. Hand shivering, I fumbled for my bag and pulled out the leather-bound book. I held it flat to illuminate the pages with the help of the moonlight as I flipped to the next entry. October 9th, 2025. Humans evolved to be expert pattern recognizers. Our brains expend valuable energy analyzing faces in real time, mouth curvature, the cadence of a blink, the subtle shift of a pupil. Most people don't notice. It's unconscious. But when a detail doesn't fit the expected pattern, something ancient and deep inside us rebels. It's an instinct honed over thousands of years, designed to protect us from the unnatural. If someone is reading this, don't make the same mistake I did. It has spent centuries perfecting its disguise, because it craves the only thing it can never truly be: a human. Don't break the illusion. Not for a second. Not even in your thoughts. I pushed myself off the tree, every joint stiff, and started walking. I forced my steps to be silent and careful. I waded back across the river. My destination was just a short distance away. On the riverbank, I found a trail of broken branches and followed them until I saw a faint glow flickering between the trees ahead. The campsite looked unchanged. The familiar silhouettes of the tents stood exactly where we had pitched them, but there was no sign of Eric. I stripped off my soaked clothes, hung them over a branch, and dug out a dry set from my bag. I sat down next to the campfire and stretched out my hands to feel the warmth. A shift in the air prickled the back of my neck, and I heard the clicking sounds of joints snapping back into place, one by one. I have something I've wanted to tell you. I found this book on the bus. My thumb traced the worn spine as I spoke. I think you know who it belongs to. Perhaps you could return it to its owner for me? Eric stepped out of the darkness. His neck was bruised, and the stretched remnants of his face, pulled too many ways, sagged down. Partially covering his eyes and mouth, he looked at me from across the flames, then sat down on the other side. He took the book from me and placed it on the ground next to him dismissively. He then stretched out his other hand, holding something. "Found your shoe." I stared down at the dirty sock protecting my foot for a moment. then forced myself to look up to meet his eyes. "Thanks," I managed. "Must have slipped off your foot," Eric said casually. "I was unlucky." "Unlucky?" Eric repeated, tasting the word in his mouth. "No, you are lucky. Lucky I found it. How would we finish our hike if you couldn't walk properly?" Every movement now felt like a performance under scrutiny. Every blink and every word I spoke had to seem natural, too fast, too slow, too rehearsed, and the fragile illusion I had mended for him would shatter. "You should get some sleep. The last leg will be the most difficult," Eric stated matter-of-factly. Grateful for the sudden exit, I gave him a small nod and slipped into my tent. But sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake for hours, listening intently and waiting for something to happen. Morning soon arrived, and I emerged from the tent to find Eric exactly where I had left him. Though something was different. The item that had kept me alive was gone. As we packed up the tent for the last time, I spotted the now blackened and gray remnants of leather and paper in the fire pit. The trail was uneven and littered with slippery rocks, wet from overnight dew. Concentrating on each careful step gave me a brief mental reprieve from the predator I could feel stalking just a few paces behind me. As I stepped out of the tree line and onto the road, the footsteps behind me abruptly disappeared. I turned and looked back into the dark woods I had spent the weekend trapped in. The only traces of him were quadrupedal prints pressed into the dirt beside my own boot prints. My mind replayed every moment of the last few days like a nightmare I couldn't shake as I waited for my ride home. The bus rumbled as it pulled away from the stop. I leaned back in my seat, the window cool against my temple, and let out a slow breath. After a while, I slipped a hand into my jacket pocket and felt something dry and brittle. Charred scraps of paper rested in my hand. The edges were blackened and fragile, but the writing was still legible. I took out my phone and opened a blank note. I'm doing my best to recount everything that has happened while the memories are still vivid and fresh in my mind. And alright guys, that wraps up some unnerving Reddit horror stories. Would you like to see more videos like this in the future? If so, please comment down below your thoughts, like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Instagram, and follow me on Spotify. It means the world. I appreciate your guys' support. Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. It helps so much. And comment down below, would you like to see longer videos, shorter videos, or this same length? I read every single comment, so please comment down below. Check out some other videos on the channel. I appreciate you guys watching. And this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Most people think the internet's darkest websites are hidden somewhere on the dark web, but a lot of them aren't hidden at all. They're public, anyone can access them, and some of them have been sitting online for over a decade, waiting for innocent people to stumble upon them and witness something horrific. The disturbing part isn't only the disturbing contents of the website, but it's the people behind them. People documenting their violent fantasies, obsessions, conspiracy theories, or, in some cases, their final words before committing murder. Today, we're diving into the internet's darkest websites. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And let's get into it. Free World Alliance. Somewhere right now is a 30-something-year-old living in a dark, dingy basement. Probably their parents, surrounded by empty energy drinks, beer cans, and other adult paraphernalia. They're isolated from friends, family, the entire world. They are spiraling into an abyss they can't crawl out of. Going further into an inescapable madness. This may sound like your average Reddit user, detached from a community of people in real life. They need somewhere to share what's on their mind. And while I'm sure plenty of them exist there, some people need to take it further than Reddit. They just have too much to say, too many thoughts on their mind, and too many of them way more explicit than even Reddit can handle. Welcome to Free World Alliance. When first opening, it's like a tsunami of flashing colors that will either hypnotize you or give you a headache. It gave me the latter. In big, bright, bold letters, the words Free World Alliance cover almost the entire page, as well as a logo for whatever that is. It seems vague and doesn't give any impressions of anything wrong or creepy, but just a quick scroll down and whatever you thought Free World Alliance meant quickly disappears. What was already a wall of colors and shapes becomes even more chaotic as the page is packed to the brim with what looks like one long run-on sentence that someone vomited into a journal. But instead of a private notebook, they bought a domain and made it available for anyone to see. That is, if you can read it. The moving rainbows are still flashing in the background, and the wall of text being written in white doesn't make it any easier to read. Once I can make out what it says, I quickly realize that it makes no sense. But besides that, the language is vile. I can't share a lot of it because it's honestly too explicit, but some lines that aren't so terrible and worth sharing are: Americans are all maggot-ridden freaks since they are born. Within days to weeks to months, degenerate into total zombies. Or a toddler keeps their fingers and toe muscles and has to be put in a rubber toddler suit, with everything else being the same as the babies. And that's just half of it. A lot of it is very intimate in nature, especially about women. There's no clear message or point, but it's all very objectifying and just gross. And then along with that is a lot of talk about babies, but obviously not in a cute or wholesome way, but rather about how they're zombies, that they need to be hurt or changed in some ways. The whole thing is creepy as hell, and it only gets worse. The more I look at it, the more this world opens up. I see the same type of language that pops up, and a lot of words are repeated over and over again, like they talk a lot about pixies, lure girls, zombies, and denizens. It's like they're creating their own fantasy world with mythical creatures that they've created. But there's nothing whimsical about this. It just gets alarmingly more deranged. Not surprisingly, a lot of it revolves around extreme conspiracy theories, like the Illuminati. But even with the parts on that, it goes beyond what an average conspiracy theorist believes in. On one page it says, Supreme Magic Spellbook first in both text and pictures. For magic, magic book, Scientology, and Illuminati not even showing up at all. Even if you're lying about it, Google, you shouldn't be lying about it even if you think it's going to help. It's not. All it causes is dyskinesia and disconnection from reality. Stop helping them produce zombies like the news always does. I mean, that's just light work for Free World Alliance. Moving on from the rambling gibberish on the Illuminati, the government, and zombies, there's also multiple sections that include images of German hate symbols with headers above it that say flag of the Free World Alliance. It does look like the symbol is flipped and not the original symbol that the Germans used, but that doesn't really decrease how disturbing it is, especially when I scroll down a little more and see multiple sections where they've uploaded pictures of state laws on intimacy between an adult and someone who is not an adult. Their commentary on that is pure anger. I can't even say what they wrote because they mentioned the word that sounds like grape probably 10 times in just one paragraph. But basically, they're extremely upset that it's illegal to engage in that. And that's just one section. I searched up that word and it comes up 45 times on that site. And each piece with it just gets more offensive than the last. Now, clearly, whoever created the Free World Alliance is much less than stable. I'm sure there's mental illness behind it, especially with how much of it is just rambling with no beginning and end. But how much of the disgusting and depraved language can be excused because of that? Because not only is it horrifying, there's just so much of it. At one point on the site, they list at least 100, if not more, websites listed, each one with descriptions of what they are and who they'd be useful towards. Each one is created by the same person. Some examples are Magic Guild, for people who want to be blacksmiths as well as already being a pirate. 9/11 Conspiracy Theory, for 9/11 conspiracy theorists. Society of Wizards, for complete and utter perverts. Tell her she has to read through the whole thing to understand how good it is. That is just 3 of many. And each single one is just as long as the first one I came across. Tens of thousands of words of either complete nonsense or misogynistic, violent, and downright terrifying rambling. Like I started this story with, this person has to be unemployed and most likely living in their mother's basement. There's no way someone who works full-time would have enough time on their hands to do all of this. My theory is correct based on a couple things I found on the website, such as I am still supported by my parents though. Kill any who think I should and not be able to accept donations, or the bank will take all your money away, and Scientologists will kick you out of your house. But digging deeper into this, I was able to find out more information than just that. More details on who is behind the Free World Alliance and its insanity. In the section where they go into each website, one line says, "For parts of my life story, Pinnacle of the Dragon data." Upon clicking that link, I'm brought to a site where I'm first met with a huge star-shaped symbol that is recurring on the other sites as well. Below that it says, Pinnacle of the Draco data. Pindar is Allah Arawa Viakad. I'm not sure if he's referring to the ancient Greek poet when he says Pindar, but obviously, whoever this is not him. What is true though is that Allah Arawa Viakad is whoever is behind all of this. Of course, it's most likely that's a pseudonym for him. I find it very unlikely that's what's written on his birth certificate. But what does seem likely is that the picture below this one is taken of himself. Along with the photo, he gives a long list of descriptions of himself, such as personality, always likes to be supreme, but will always stand corrected honestly and maintain power, referencing past successes and, if necessary, future prophecy and eternal angelic expectations of Allah's eternal power, which was never really contested by pixies or archangels. Again, nothing is really making sense. That doesn't give me an accurate picture of who he is, other than most likely suffering from a mental illness, which is not breaking news. But scroll down a little more, and something shifts. There's a change. It's subtle, but it's there. Under a header that says, "A short story about me, Allah," there's a long, extensive couple of paragraphs. But this time, it's coherent, and it actually makes sense. We can actually get an idea of who this is. It reads, "In fall 2003, when I was a freshman in college, actually born April 1st, 1985 AD, I did not believe in any of this conspiracy nonsense until I was near the end of an infamous video game called Deus Ex. There, I, the primary characters, explain how the 20th century was ruled by corporations, governments, and international organizations. I thought deeply on these lines, realizing that if one organization had control of enough power, then it would be able to effectively rule the world in secret. I first looked up Majestic 12 Conspiracy, the faction in the game with the most power. I found only links to Deus Ex. However, when I looked up Illuminati Conspiracy, I felt sick to my stomach because of how many links it brought up on Google. That is when my search for truth about the world around me began. I became a conspiracy theorist addict, but I wasn't quite sure if it was real. I began to follow links to websites with luminous knowledge. Alice Bailey began to convert me into Luciferianism as I read about how the snake in the Garden of Eden was good for freeing us from our bondage to a false paradise of ignorance. The Illuminati were in resonance with me about their hatred of false religions like the Catholic Church. For a while, I thought the Illuminati were good and fighting evil, but not yet in control of the world. I kept on stumbling over conspiracy theories about 9/11, but at the time it seemed ludicrous that the government would attack their own people. After a while, I finally began to nurture the possibility that 9/11 was caused by the government. So I went to the easiest and quickest source of information on the subject, Amazon book reviews. Again, my stomach sank as I saw 4.5-star reviews for almost all of the 9/11 conspiracy theorist books. I finally began to investigate that. Soon after, it became real to me who caused 9/11. The Illuminati ruled the world, and they were evil. I didn't even tell my family that winter break. I did not want to make the horrors of this world real to them yet. I started following down a dark path of searching for the answer of who controlled the Illuminati. For a long time, I thought that evil reptilians ruled the world. Throughout this time, I was also studying the occult in the Book of the Law, trying desperately to unravel the mysteries of the everything I knew to exist. I was still an atheist at my core, though. I started doing lots of psychedelics with Eddie, Zoe, Duran, Nick, and Nate, following the direction from the Book of the Law to do strange drugs. I once tried to explain to them that the lava lamp was an anagram of the universe. A very funny occurrence. It's this point in his story that he begins to go into extreme detail about which drugs he did, how much of each one, and where it led him. Well, spoiler alert, it led him to making all of this, the Freedom World Alliance, and something else which he further describes here. I was ecstatic to know the secret finally, but I know that the Illuminati know it as well. They are the secret rulers of this earth. I laid back, closed my eyes, and saw pure white. Then I felt as if my spirit was being pulled towards my spinal cord. I could not face annihilation. At that moment, I felt I had things that I needed to complete, like my movie script, so I sat up saying no, opened my eyes, and forced myself back into this world. I felt a sense of horror as I realized that I just denied myself perfect omniscience instead of being in an animal like a lowly angel. After a couple hours, I came down a little and wanted to get up again, so I took a whole bunch of DPT. I laid back and saw matrixy symbols pass from the right to the left before my eyes. Each symbol had a definite meaning, but it was completely analog. It existed in a field of symbols that formed the alien supreme computer that was sustaining this universe. They were all possible shapes and colors. These symbols passed for a couple of hours. As my trip wore off, I began to forget the details of the Matrix, but I still retained the fact that we are living in an alien hive. Since then, I have been refining my own proof to match the one they revealed to me. Here it is, Supreme Matrix Theory Abstract. He then links a whole other website for that theory, and as you guessed, it is all completely insane. But those parts, they seemed kind of lucid, which very quickly comes to an abrupt end when the next section begins with Harry Potter or Barely Sober. 'Cause I'm so smart, betrayers take 3 years to figure out how to press buttons on their UC to produce what I thought should be nanites replicated everywhere back in 2009 to fix global warming. Obviously, it's no surprise that this person is in this mental state, considering he did take a massive amount of drugs and is most likely battling some sort of mental illness on top of that. But it is scary to consider how that headspace could put him in a position where he acts on these dangerous and impulsive thoughts, and at times, the violent feelings, because he clearly has desires to behave in ways that are just disgusting. Not only the section mentioned earlier on his frustration towards laws that are there to protect people that are under the age of 18, but there's one website I came across that looks different from the rest. Lair Girls. At first, it doesn't seem that crazy. It actually looks much more normal than what we've seen so far. It's a huge list of links to random images, at least at first glance. But the more I click through these, and by the way, there is thousands of these, the more concerned I get. The common denominator among all of them is that it's 99% photos of women, sometimes normal pictures, and sometimes more explicit. Many are of adult women though, and it's not totally odd to be an adult man looking at adult content of women, so that's not totally out of the ordinary, but it doesn't stop there. There's multiple photos that, although they aren't explicit or outwardly gross, they're incredibly sketchy and leave a very unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. Like the multiple photos of children in kids' Halloween costumes, or the edit of a young Jeanette McCurdy, where he or someone else edited a photo of her so it looks more explicit. A photo of her as a teenager. All of this plus the content that's in the hundreds of websites he's created do not look good. In fact, it looks horrific. On one Reddit comment about the web ring, a user comments, "Just your ordinary internet mental illness." But is it really so ordinary? Mental illness may be something many people struggle with, and There may be other people that form their thoughts in ways that are equally as incoherent, but this goes beyond that. These websites give an idea of his desires, what he's interested in, and what he believes. It also points to someone so far removed from reality that it's unclear what they're capable of or what their intentions truly are. Free World Alliance and the other websites may point to a hazardously unstable person who's hiding in plain sight. Allah may be more than a 30-something-year-old who hasn't left his basement in months. He may be more than the average incel. He could be dangerous. But these sites have been up for a while. The first snapshot of it that's archived online is from September 24th, 2013, where it looks different, but it's most certainly still Allah. Over 10 years of uploading every thought, no matter how disturbing, obscene, or concerning it might be. So far, it doesn't seem like any of it has left the safety of the internet. Only time will tell if Free World Alliance makes its way off a computer and into the real world. Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Many of us wonder what our last words will be, who they'll be to, if they'll be meaningful, or if they won't matter at all. It's a daunting thing to face. Someday we'll utter our last breath, and we'll have no idea what those final sentences will be, or if anyone will remember them. This goes for anyone. We're all alike in that way. Well, almost everyone. For the people in prison who are awaiting their turn on death row, they have a whole other set of problems. Not only do they know when they're going to die, but they also have the added pressure of that huge question. What will my last words be? Everyone wants to say something profound before they take one last look at another human being, before they eat their last meal, or before they feel the last little bit of air. These last thoughts, the last words, and sometimes the last cries for help all have a place to live forever on the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's website. Here they've listed 600 last statements of inmates who were on death row in the state of Texas. Scrolling through the list, it's like walking around a cemetery. Masses and masses of people who all lived out their final moments in such similar ways. Though their lives each took different paths, and the reason for their incarceration was different for everyone, this one thing remained the same. They knew exactly when their last moment will be. They knew they had one last chance to say anything they wanted or anything they needed to, like Sean Derek O'Brien. In June of 1993, Sean and 5 other members of the Black and White gang kidnapped and murdered 2 teenage girls. The crime was brutal and horrific. These 2 girls, Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Penna, were only 15 and 16 years old when they were attacked in such gruesome ways. It's understandable that the family's victims were enraged and inconsolable. Their precious babies had been ripped away from them. Both girls' fathers had this to say about Sean, his friends, and their upcoming sentence. I hope the son of a bitch rots in hell. He deserves it. It doesn't make me happy, but this is the punishment he was given, and it's justifiable. I kind of feel numb in a way, knowing that I've been waiting for so long for this day to come. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. On the fateful day that Elizabeth's dad was counting down the days to, Sean had this to get off his chest. I do. I'm so sorry. I have always been sorry. It is the worst mistake that I ever made in my whole life, not because I am here, but because of what I did, and I hurt a lot of people. You and my family. I'm sorry. I have always been sorry. I am sorry. You look after each other. I love you all. Be there for one another. All right, but I am sorry. Very sorry. I love you too. All right. It doesn't take away the heaviness of what he did to those two innocent girls. No. In fact, it just makes it heavier. What he did was inexcusable. But reading through the last thoughts that ran through his head as he faced his death is still jarring. And he's not alone in feeling guilt, remorse, and shame. There's so many of these last statements that are filled with the same emotions, like Humberto Leal's last statement, which reads as follows. I'm sorry for everything that I've done. I've hurt a lot of people. For years, I've never thought that I deserved any type of forgiveness. Lord Jesus Christ in my life, I know He has forgiven me. I have accepted His forgiveness. I have accepted everything. Let this be final and be done. I take the full blame for this. I am sorry and forgive me. I am truly sorry. I ask for forgiveness. Life goes on, and it surely does. I'm sorry for the victim's family for what I did. May they forgive me. I don't know if you believe me. Life goes on. I am sure it does. To the man to the right of me, I ask for forgiveness for you. Life goes on. It surely does. I ask for forgiveness. I am truly sorry. That is all. Let's get this show on the road. One more thing. Viva Mexico. Viva Mexico. And Anthony Allen Shores. I'd like to take a moment to say I'm sorry. No amount of words could ever undo what I've done. To the family of my victims, I wish I could undo that past. It is what it is. God bless all of you. I will die with a clear conscience. I made my peace. There is no others. I would like to wish a happy birthday to Barbara Carroll. Today is her birthday. I would like to especially thank those that have helped me. You know who you are. God bless everybody until we meet again. I'm ready, Warden. But then I take a look at the other part of the website on what these inmates did and which crimes they committed. Humberto Leal was convicted on May 21st, 1994 of the abduction and murder of a 16-year-old girl in San Antonio. Not only did he kidnap and assault this poor girl, but the details are sickening. Humberto used a piece of lumber and a 35-pound chunk of asphalt to hurt her in ways that are just beyond gruesome. Now for Anthony Allen Shore, his case is no better. In some ways, it's even worse. On September 26, 1986, Anthony kidnapped a 15-year-old girl named Lori Tremblay, who was walking home from school when she was taken. He attempted to assault her and then followed that with strangulation until she sadly passed away. If that doesn't sound brutal enough, Anthony continued to basically do the same thing to 4 other girls, one of them being just 9 years old, all with strangulation. In fact, after Laura, he began to use a tourniquet with either a toothbrush or bamboo stick to tighten it. Why? Because in his words, I hurt my finger while murdering Tremblay. This granted him the legacy of the tourniquet killer. A legacy that ended with the words, God bless everybody, until we meet again, I'm ready, Warden. I don't know what's more disturbing. Reading someone's last words, or knowing that those words were uttered by someone so evil, so despicable, so sinister, that they leave the world with a clean conscience after committing such monstrous and heinous crimes. But these delusional and, quite honestly, full of apologies and remorseful statements are not unique to Humberto and Anthony. Hundreds of them all sound the same. And each time I click on what they did to be there in the first place, and more often than not, it's something so atrocious, it makes my stomach turn. It's not everyone though. There are others throughout the site that are different, less remorseful, but more so angry, and in some ways, even more haunting. Such as with the case Douglas Feldman. Douglas was arrested on September 22nd, 1999, after he had been cut off by a driver of an 18-wheeler. And instead of going about his day, he proceeded to pull up next to the truck and shoot him. 46 minutes passed after that incident, and Douglas had yet to calm down. He was still enraged, and now that the truck driver was gone, he had nowhere else to put all of his anger. At the same time, Nicholas Valquez, another truck driver, was at a gas station filling up his tank, truly just minding his own business, living his life as normal. I don't know if it was the fact that he was a truck driver, or it was just the first person he saw when he pulled into the station. But Douglas decided in his blinding rage that he was to shoot Nicholas as well. Clearly, Douglas is unwell, because all of this wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing he did, caused by such an immense road rage that he couldn't contain himself. This was who Douglas was. After the fact, he wrote 81 letters to a former girlfriend, and in one of them he says, "It feels wonderful to cause their death and to watch their pain. God forbid I ever had my finger on the button to launch a nuclear explosive device, because I guarantee that I would wipe as many of these bastards off the face of the planet as I'm able." But this insanity did not result in a ridiculous apology and asking for forgiveness. No. Douglas leaned further into his craziness when asked to give a last statement. He says, "I hereby declare Robert Stephen Everett and Nicholas Valquez guilty of crimes against me, Douglas Allen Feldman. Either by fact or by proxy, I find them both guilty. I hereby sentence both of them to death, which I carried out in August 1998. As of that time, the state of Texas has been holding me illegally in confinement and by force for 15 years. I hereby protest my pending execution and demand immediate relief." After his statement, and as he awaited his fate, his energy was incredibly nervous. His feet twitched under the sheet. He seemed to flinch as the drug entered his system, and then nothing. He finished his life without even a single trace of regret for the harm that he had caused. No guilt, only a fantasy that actually the people he murdered in cold blood had done him wrong. and that in the next 60 seconds, the warden would stop the whole thing and let him free. Of course, he was wrong. Most of these inmates are. Most have done horrible things. And while it can be argued whether death is really the right thing to do, it's not like they deserve a happy and peaceful life free of any consequence. But that's most. Because of course the judicial system is flawed, and there are statements that really make me question if it has failed some of these inmates in such a tragic and irreversible way. This statement from Cameron Todd Williamham says, "Yeah, the only statement I want to make is that I'm an innocent man, convicted of a crime I did not commit. I've been persecuted for 12 years for something I did not do. From God's dust I came, and to dust I will return. So the earth shall become my throne. I gotta go. Road dog. I love you, Gabby." And another one from Gary Graham. "I would like to say that I did not kill Bobby Lambert, that I'm an innocent black man that is being murdered. This is a lynching that is happening in America tonight. There's overwhelming and compelling evidence of my defense that has never been heard in any court of America. What is happening here is an outrage for any civilized country to anybody anywhere to look at what's happening here is wrong." But then there's the last statement of Terry Edwards. This one stood out for some reason, but it's short and chilling. "Yes, I made peace with God. I hope y'all make peace with this." That last sentence is filled with contempt. It's bleeding with frustration at the way his life is being handled, the way it's being ended, with no way for him to prevent it. He hopes the people watching this feel ashamed, guilty. He hopes they repent. Because Terry claimed, until the day he died, that he did not do what put him on death row. What's in his file is that he and his cousin robbed a restaurant and murdered 2 employees in the process, and Terry was the one that pulled the trigger. But according to Terry, what's on record is not what happened. He never admitted to being the gunman and insisted his cousin was behind it. His cousin, who did have a history of violent crime, something that Terry did not. That wasn't his only argument, though. The problem with the conviction began when the first forensic analysis came back with no evidence that suggested Terry had gunpowder residue on his hand. But with a further cross-examination, the analyst pretty much changed her mind. She said that one chemical was found that could have been from the gun, and Terry probably wiped away the other 2 or 3 elements that are usually found in a case like this, which was looked into by a former FBI agent who called bullshit. He said that made no sense scientifically, that there was no way Terry could have wiped away only 1 or 2 of the particles that would have proven him guilty. Besides that, the entire case was sketchy. The defense attorney had been involved in 3 other cases where the defendants were exonerated due to misconduct, including cases from the same forensic analyst that was handling Terry's case. These people were not reliable or competent at their job. Clearly. The even more pressing problem in Terry's mind was that his jury had been made up of all white people, creating racial discrimination. All of this combined, he wanted a stay of execution. He wanted the court to properly investigate this because he knew that he was innocent of the murder that would put him in that seat. But his cries and pleas were denied. Just 1 week before the execution, the attorney's office blocked him with any resources that were created for people in cases where the validity was questioned. And on January 26th, 2017, the state of Texas carried out his capital punishment, leaving him no final chance at rectifying what he had done. None of these people listed on this website had any second chances. And when you do things like hurt children, murder your own family, or brutally assault someone, you don't really deserve one. But the stories like Terry's are genuinely heartbreaking. Even in the case that he had done it, that he had murdered those two people, there has to be the room for argument that maybe death doesn't have to be the only option. He wasn't a cold-blooded maniac like Douglas Feldman and Anthony Shore. Maybe it was a mistake, brought about by pressure from his cousin, something that he'll feel incredibly remorseful about the rest of his life. But that's impossible when it was cut short without even a second thought. Now his picture, his statement, and a final date will be listed forever on the Department of Criminal Justice's website, alongside the worst of the worst, true murderers, and evil monsters. They all died in the same chair, and they'll live forever on the same dark corner of the internet. And alright guys, that wraps up the internet's darkest websites. Let me know what you thought about this video down below. Did you enjoy it? Did you find it interesting? And what would you like to see in the future? Would you like to see another video like this in the future? If so, please comment down below. I appreciate all of the comments, criticism, feedback, everything. It really does mean the world. And make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. The channel subscriber goal is 1 million subscribers, so please subscribe. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. It means the world. And this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye.